just waiting for everything to say we are live, which it is. So we are now live. Welcome to the stream, everybody. This is a Picard season 3 breakdown, thoughts, and general review. And I once again have a very special guest. His name is Clayton Rumley. He's an author, amongst many other things. I've been learning a lot about Clayton, and he is one of my subscribers, and he's our guest for this stream. So welcome, Clayton.
Hello, thank you for having me again.
Thank you for coming on, and once again, I absolutely love the shirt.
Thank you. I felt it was appropriate given how TNG-like this season has been.
Yes, yeah, it's certainly in visual style. It certainly has been a lot like TNG, and I think I think that and the cast would probably be where the similarities sort of end. Certainly in terms of the structure of it and all of that. So yeah, really, I suppose we should start with. Maybe a general sort of thoughts on the season as a whole, and then we'll go into some more detail. I'll let you have the floor for this one.
With respect to the season as a whole, much better than seasons 1 and 2, partially because they spent a good deal of time kind of undoing the mess that were seasons 1 and 2. Except I felt that it set up a lot of things in this season and then didn't really deliver, or a lot of stuff happened that was kind of anticlimactic. Everything about Vadic was like, we spent, half the season building her up as this villain, as this mastermind to contend with, like Khan-esque sort of, where there's this cat and mouse game and everything, and then like, oh, she's dead. And now the real villain's revealed, and we've got to rush and defeat them in the remaining like 3 episodes. Things like that kind of felt flat for me. But overall, a better season. Still not quite the same feel as like TNG era Trek. There were no stories that actually like made you think or made you question stuff. Decisions were made, and they always turned out to be the right decision. There was never any sort of ambiguity that's left to the viewer as to whether or not what they've done because they had to do it was the right thing. And there's so many examples in every Trek before the Abrams reboots where that happens. And it's kind of, there was a comment on one of your videos, your most recent video, reviewing the finale, by a user named Don Hadfield 2835, and he said, listening to you and the other commenters makes me wonder why you watch Star Trek. Oh, it's to find nothing to do but complain and find fault with everything. Sit back, relax, turn off your brain, and enjoy. I know I and 90% of the others did.
I'll stop you there. I was going to bring this up as well because I noticed that first thing this morning. So continue, please.
My argument is that Star Trek was never supposed to be a show that you turn your brain off and enjoy.
Yes.
That's kind of more of a Star Wars thing. Like, there's the bad guy, there's the good guy. They use the Force, they blow up the planet-destroying weapon, and there's a big award ceremony at the end, and that's great for what it is. But Star Trek really was about pushing different philosophical ideas, challenging different philosophical ideas, making you think and see the process that lead to people going down specific paths, and the newer Trek doesn't really do that. It's like, yeah, just turn your brain off. We're going to blow some stuff up. We're going to have cool effects, and yeah. So that's kind of like the complainy aspect of it. The effects are gorgeous. The shots in this season, some of these shots have just been absolutely beautiful, and stuff that could never have been done with earlier iterations of Trek just because the technology wasn't there. So why complain? Because we're being given a package that is supposed to, that we have certain expectations of based on how it was in the past, and we're not getting what we kind of expected from the franchise. You think Star Trek TNG era Star Trek, you're going forward with new Star Trek, you expect it to be more of the same. What are our current modern day challenges being shown to us through the guise of a alien that is having the problem that we're having today? And how do you address these problems? What is there a right answer? Is there a wrong answer? Is there just a decision that's made, and the question whether or not it's right or wrong is left up to the viewer? We're not given that. We're just, hey, there's the bad guy, we're the good guys, let's blow stuff up.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, I was going to mention this anyway because you took the words pretty much right out of my mouth. Star Trek was never switch your brain off TV, and we're not finding ways to moan, complain, or hate this season. We're looking at it from as an as objective point of view as we can. And I said this going into the season. I said, look, if it's good, I'm going to say it's good. If it's bad, I'm going to say it's bad. And I'm going to tell you the reasons why. Star Trek had those wonderful stories that always left you wondering, okay, so my moral compass is a little askew here. How do I feel about this? Do I trust these? Do I think that these were the bad guys or those were the bad guys? Who's in the wrong? Who's in the right? Star Trek always asked those questions, but it always asked them of you. It never told you the answer. And for someone to come along and say, the individual, it doesn't matter. It's the question or the comment itself, the mentality. People say, "Oh, sit back and enjoy it. Why have you got to pick everything apart? Why can't you just enjoy it?" Well, that's what we go to see movies for. The blockbuster movies in the cinema. That's what we do. We go and watch these movies because we're expecting to be wowed by what we see. And we can switch our brain off and, put aside our, expectations and sort of think about what it is we're actually there for. When I sit down and watch The Next Generation, some of the great episodes of The Next Generation, I'm always wondering on the way out, what do I have done? Who's right, who's wrong? You're absolutely right. It feels very much this season as a Star Trek show in visual style only.
Yeah. And in the interest of balance, we aren't necessarily looking through rose-tinted lenses at old Trek either, and being like, wow, it was all wonderful. There were poorly written episodes. There were poorly done episodes. Shades of Grey, TNG's Shades of Grey was terrible. Yeah, Voyager's Threshold is universally reviled by everyone. Like, so yes, you're going to have problems. And I guess in one way, as much as I loved the serialized storytelling of Deep Space Nine, the episodic nature of TNG, Enterprise, and Voyager, and of course the original series, allowed you to have bad episodes that could be isolated from the rest. When you have these like Discovery and Picard with their mystery box seasons, or series if you're across the pond, if they've made a bad decision, or if there's a poor writing choice made, they're stuck with it for all X number of episodes. And it's then hard to enjoy it as much because it's like, oh yeah, that bad decision they made in season or in episode 2, well, it's carried forward and it still doesn't make any sense in episode 7. And it's been this thread that they've been riding on the whole time, and it kind of takes you out of it. It's like the mycelial network in Discovery. Like, this sounds like 1930s science fiction, with very little knowledge but a lot of fantasy, and Star Trek was never really about the fantasy aspect. They tried to keep as much of it grounded in theoretical or near theoretical science. Like the warp drive isn't magic. It's based off different concepts that people smarter than me understand. And
yeah, but it never treated you like an idiot either.
true.
It never said, here's the science behind it. We know you're not going to understand this. It always tried to explain it. But New Trek, its science fiction is pseudo at best. It's a case of, the old, science is swear word cool.
Yes.
It's hip, it's in. It doesn't matter if you understand the laws of physics or not. But generally speaking, that aspect of what you were talking about in terms of being trapped by the writing. So, Picard season 3, its biggest problem is season 1 and 2.
Yes.
I kind of get the feeling that if Star Trek Picard season 3 had been season 1, they wouldn't have had so many limitations. But that would beg the question: what kind of quality stories can they tell? Now, I don't think Star Trek in general works as serialized format. It works episodic. It always has worked best episodic. And we've discussed this in the last stream. You can pretty much have a story underneath all that goes on throughout the season. Enterprise did it. DS9 did it. That's fine. But there wasn't very much in the way of episodic storytelling. It was all a vehicle to get us to the end goal. It didn't feel like there was any. The fine details weren't there, and it all felt like it was just leading to that one half an hour of finale, which is all we really got in terms of conclusion to that the season-long story arc was just half an hour finale in which the Enterprise D did some visually impressive yet kind of unrealistic maneuvers and things that we never saw it do, and then the rest of the episode was an epilogue. And
sorry, continue.
I'm just saying, it just felt, it felt like fan fiction, but with no story there to support it. And you think about the first episode and the mystery that was being set up. There was terrorist attacks to divert attention away from what the shapeshifter changelings actually wanted, and it all felt like filler because the focus was on the investigative side of it, which is fair enough. You investigate away, but it took far too long to get to the point. And then as you say, we found that the shapeshifters were not actually the bad guy or the real bad guy.
Yeah.
And it just felt like a complete mess. Now, don't get me wrong, nostalgia wise, in terms of the seeing everything again, it was fantastic. But you're talking just basic storytelling staples weren't there.
Yeah, and like a lot of New Trek, again with science was not there. The one thing I do give them credit for with the writing was the Irumodic syndrome being a side effect, or not the real Irumodic syndrome, but a side effect of Picard's time with the Borg. Mm-hmm. That was smart.
Yes,
like that was really clever.
That was a retcon that worked.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Yeah. That was brilliant. But then stretching it into, we did this change to his brain that affected the DNA in his sperm, and so that he would pass this on to his child. And with all the 24th century technology that we've seen, where they can scan and do DNA checks, and they've got your history in the transporter records so that they can do comparisons, and they've got medical files where they've got your entire genome and can do comparisons, and nobody caught this change.
Yeah.
Given all the medical testing that Picard would have gone through after being liberated from the Borg.
Extensive, yeah. Starfleet wouldn't have just said, "How are you feeling? You're all right." "Yeah, yes, I'm okay, thank you." And off he goes back to being a captain. They would have picked up anything.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like, oh, we pulled the laser pointer out of your head and, you're good to go.
Yeah, peeled back the onion and we found you. You're fine now. Your blood's fine. Your biology seems roughly the same. By the way, I wouldn't have kids if I were you. You might you might be giving someone a few too many nanoprobes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like after he found out, he's been calling up Crusher and been like, Beverly, and been like, you might want to get yourself tested.
Yeah. Yes, it turns out I have some very, very active ones.
We're like, think of all the few women that Picard hooked up with through TNG.
Mm-hmm.
Any that were post Best of Both Worlds, like Captain's Holiday, did he hook up with Bash after Best of Both Worlds? I can't remember the order of episodes, but I mean, like, it's not like Picard has been celibate for the last 30 years.
No, and I've noticed a couple of comments came up and on my finale video, and I was thinking, you know what, I never actually cottoned on to that. What about Laris? I mean, yeah, okay, he's 80, but come on, James Doohan was still active, not long before he passed. He was a very old father. It's still possible. Poor Laris, says, you raise my Borg children, and she. The reason it was brought up is because by the end of the season, she's no more. She's forgotten about the entire season. Just forgotten about her after episode 1, and suddenly Picard's with Crusher, and they're all having wonderful family time, and poor Laris the Romulan, who's been his housekeeper, probably been cleaning up after him for way too long. Suddenly, she's not a thing anymore. She's probably still on that planet that she was going to go to, waiting for him.
Yep.
I just again,
that's cold.
It's cold, but I think the writers there, they sort of, they get carried away and they tend to forget these things, and they forget that we know that these characters were there, and we know that they were there.
And sorry.
No, go ahead.
We talk about how so much of the episode was like visual member berries. It's like, oh, there's the Voyager, there's the Defiant, there's the HMS Bounty, and all this stuff. But when you think about it, the writing of this entire season has been member berries. Like, they are recycling a lot of stuff from TNG era Trek.
So much.
The Picard son angle. Like, there was an entire episode in TNG, I don't remember the name, where that guy was presented as Picard's son, the
Jason.
rock climber.
Yeah,
Jason.
yeah.
It was a ruse by like the Ferengi or something.
Bok.
But there was that whole issue of like, what would Picard do faced with a child he never knew about, and stuff like that. Touched on briefly in Nemesis with Shinzon being a clone of Picard, and like now there is this other person who is a relative of Picard, and what would he do? Picard was so upset at the end of Generations because, or at the start, not Generations. It's Generations at the start where he finds out that his brother and nephew died in the fire.
Yeah, there'll be no more Picards. Yeah.
Which apparently they fixed up the vineyard afterwards because he was living there. But
this house has been standing for 800 years. It's only burned down once, I promise.
Yeah, and there's still bullets in the wall.
The original. Oh my word! Oh.
So, the Shrike is a lot like the Scimitar. Is that the name of the ship?
Scimitar, yeah.
there's just every time the plot just seems to be like, oh, they've done this already.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like South Park's The Simpsons already did it. It's just, the villain comes up and is like, haha, I'm gonna, go back in time and assimilate Earth. It's like, well, we did that in First Contact.
Well, you noticed one of the things I noticed from the trailer and then concurrently in the episode itself was the attack on the recruitment center. All you need to do is watch Beyond, and it's pretty much the same thing. It's just, and one thing that tallies up between the two things, those two incidents, was the death toll. Minuscule. Okay, so you've blown up the Starfleet archives, and it says left at least a few hundred people dead. It's like, you would have any idea how many casualties that actually would be? How many people are in those buildings? Are you mad? And then you go to Picard, and this portal opens up underneath the recruitment center. Recruitment center falls through, and then deposits onto a city, and there's like 900 people dead.
Yeah,
but
they were all on holiday.
Exactly. Yeah, no one was in. It's fine. Inside job. But the similarities, not only are they pulling from Star Trek in general in terms of pre-2005 Star Trek, which they don't know an awful lot about. Excuse Terra Metalis for a second, but generally speaking, these writers they cherry pick from Star Trek. That's what they do. But they're using their New Trek's material as well, and copying a lot of what New Trek does, because they think that that's where we want them to go. Well, it's not where they want them to go. And it's not just Star Trek. The entire Enterprise run through the Borg cube was just Star Wars.
Oh yeah, that was like the Enterpriseian Falcon there. It was just
it was crazy. And I was rolling my eyes at the same time enjoying the visuals of it. But there was it's like, come on, an original Star Trek story, please give us an original Star Trek story. Something, yes, you can utilize the type of story that you're wanting to tell. You can utilize a previous Star Trek episode and build on that, by all means, but at least make it in some way an original outcome. We have to get the Borg Queen back again, even though it failed in season 2. In some ways, it failed in Voyager. Why bring her back again? And the scenes with, I don't know about you, Clayton, but when I was watching the scenes with Picard trying to get through to Jack, when Jack's been assimilated, he's Locutus Jack of Borg or whatever. I don't feel that they laid enough groundwork to have that emotional of a scene.
It's in one of the in the comment I made on your review video, or my massive list of comments, because I always write giant novels.
You do, and I love them.
With respect to that scene, like right before Picard goes onto the cube to go find Jack, he's like, I wish I could do your impression of Jack is still in there. He's still Jack.
Yeah. That's good, by the way.
You've known the guy for like 5 days.
Yeah.
And now he's like, yep, he's still going to be Jack in there, despite the fact that when he was in the Borg Collective, you get stripped of your individuality and all that. Like, he knows what the experience would be like. So yeah, you're right. They shared a couple drinks on the holodeck, and now it's they're father and son, and all they needed was a hug. And
well, not just that, but in parallel to where Jack was when we first met him, he was all for his mother. He didn't want to know his father because he assumed his father didn't want to know him, because he'd heard Picard say to a bunch of cadets who glorified him. He turns to them and says, "Starfleet is the only home I've ever needed," and it's my only family. I don't think that Jack will come around after 20 odd, however many years of bitterness and not really having his father around, to suddenly want it, to suddenly having that relationship that's strong enough to encapsulate that scene that we saw. Where Picard has plugged himself into the Borg matrix, and he's in there talking to Jack, trying to get him to come around. I don't think it was earned. There was just nothing earned about it.
Yeah. The relationship really didn't have the time to develop to that point where you could expect that type of emotional plea to work. Not to mention the fact that we don't, I mean, oh Lord, this feels like, have you seen the movie Captain Marvel?
Yeah, once. And once was enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They hook her up to that AI that I can't even remember the name of that AI. But it talks to her, and you go into that virtual world, you go into that metaverse.
Yes.
And that's never been quite portrayed with respect to the Borg. There were the Unimatrix Zero episodes of Voyager that implied that when Borg were regenerating, their minds kind of go into this fantasy world they create where they can interact as themselves again, but they have no memory of it and whatever. So like
a communal kind of oasis, basically.
Yeah, and the whole, and maybe this could be explained by the fact that there are very few active Borg left. What they were portraying there anyway, there were like 2 Borg left to fight the Will and Worf, so they each got 1 Borg.
Yeah. It sounds fair.
A lot of that just didn't make sense, but
no.
Or at least there wasn't enough of an explanation. I think they're saying that the Voyager finale, where Admiral Janeway infects the Borg to once again kill the Queen, because whatever.
Picard ripping her head off, didn't do anything really.
Yeah, and but the Voyager thing, like even during when they successfully infected the Borg, and they were taking the transwarp conduit back to the Alpha Quadrant, the Queen said at one point that one of the spheres had assimilated a defense to had figured out how to fight off the virus, and was still maintained, and she was still in contact with them. So in theory, once they figured out how to do it, they'd spread that through the collective and kind of recover what they could. So it didn't sound like the Borg were as decimated as they should have been. Like they may have been interrupted, but it didn't sound like it was just like, yeah, we have to now start eating the other Borg to stay alive because we can't assimilate anybody anymore. We can't do anything anymore. Like that didn't feel like that was the end of the Borg. It just felt like it was a tactical blow to them.
Yeah.
And they might stay away from the Alpha Quadrant for a while because every time they do, it's major losses for them. But this whole thing is like, and then the argument is if another problem I have with this is that the Borg seem to be acting on revenge. Yeah. Prior to, in all of Trek, the Borg were they're just this force of nature. They're the storm on the horizon. Yeah. They come, they assimilate, they move on and assimilate, and they grow. There is no emotion behind it. That is just their directive as a species, if you could call them a species. And here, they just turned the Borg Queen into this petty, revenge-drenched villainess who, she... And even if that was her motivation, wouldn't she be mad at Janeway?
Oh, massively so. Why would she be so mad with Picard? I mean, Picard, yes, okay. You've got first contact, and the Borg Queen was annihilated on the Enterprise E in the past. I mean, you could argue that word of her demise never really got very far because it was in the past. But
yeah,
it Speaking of First Contact, and this segues into First Contact, and another similarity. That entire scene was just First Contact version 2. I said this in my review. It's First Contact version 2, and it was a lot worse than First Contact, because at least with First Contact there was a bit more sinister. She was more sinister, and she was a great unknown because she was not known to us before. But she was looking for an equal. She was always looking for an equal, someone. She was looking for a king to share her throne.
Yeah.
And that's what Picard was. Now, okay, she's done with Picard, and she wants Picard's son to share the throne with. Well, again, carbon copy of First Contact. And why she'd want revenge on Picard in the first place, I've no idea. Nothing about that makes any kind of narrative sense. There's no origin to that.
It was the crew of the TNG that used Picard to send the sleep command to the cube so they could destroy it.
Yeah.
In Best of Both Worlds, so Picard wasn't complacent in any of this. And it's funny when you brought up First Contact, I'm like, yeah, the Queen selected Data as her equal, as her king. Picard comes and says, take me, you can have Locutus back, and she's like, nah. And then she takes Jack, and he's like, take me, you can have Locutus back. She's like, I didn't want you 30 years ago, buddy.
yeah. I mean, that's a fair point. I didn't. No. You are literally old news.
Yeah. But you're right. It's the exact same plot. It's like somebody else, the Borg Queen snatches somebody else. Picard offers himself up again, and he gets rejected, and it's like.
It's season 3, the official rehash.
Let's talk Jack. Talk Jack.
I'm for that.
Everything is about Jack, and they do a lot of misleading stuff with him in the beginning. The voice of somebody calling to him, and it sounds like Beverly's voice, because he says at one point later, "Oh, I thought it was my mother's voice, but it was the Borg Queen." None of that jives with anything Borg related. The red eye thing is like the paw wraiths from Deep Space Nine.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're building on. I don't know if you're aware. J.J. Abrams loves the color red. He does everything in his shows and movies. There is like a red matter or a red MacGuffin that needs to happen, and it was like. And I knew this from Alias. The TV series Alias was an Abrams series. And the first episode, there was that little red floating orb filled with water. And that was just the MacGuffin of the episode. But it turns into this big story arc where this red material, whatever it is this big important thing. And then since then, the second I watched the 2009 Star Trek, and it was like Spock said, I tried to stop the supernova with red matter. And I'm like, the heck is red matter? That's not even like a made up Star Trek term, and it's just up there with Avatar's unobtainium.
Oh
as a name for something. And so whenever I see red being used for MacGuffins, that's immediately what I think. And the red door appeared right away, and I'm like, oh. Plus, it was the same stupid door thing that we just went through with season 2.
Exactly.
The mystery behind the door.
Yeah, and the visual style of that door shared so much in common with if you've ever played the game Silent Hill. And
played the first one.
And Stranger Things. It was all Stranger Things. The roots coming out of the door. There was nothing intrinsically Borg about it. It was just. You're an author. You know how to write a story to titillate people's wonder and what is coming, and to give little subtle clues, and they have to be incredibly subtle in order for you to get the desired effect at the end, to going, of course that's who it is.
Yeah.
There was no, you're quite right, there was absolutely nothing in those early episodes that pointed to the Borg whatsoever. If
Yeah.
it would have been, I suppose, a bit too on the nose if, for example, it was green.
Yes.
His eyes were
Because
green.
if you think Borg, what color do you think Borg?
Yeah, I
You
think
think green.
Yeah, especially when they're attached to machine guns.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh God.
no, the Jack, but Jack, the actor who played him, absolutely smashing. I really enjoyed his performances. They were really, really good, and he sort of sank into the role very well. But I kind of get the feeling he didn't actually know what the role was. Because again, if you tell your actors what is happening throughout the story, they can incorporate certain characteristics within their own character to get their character to the end, to the outcome. They can add little subtleties in there. Does that make sense? Or am I talking out of my...
No. I agree. I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, yeah, it's like they just said, here's your scene, here's your lines,
Yeah,
and here's your emotion, but without understanding your character's background, and I don't really act, so I don't know all the things that get done with like method acting and stuff like that. So, but I imagine we generally want more information in order to become the character.
yeah.
And he still did a good job. Like he's just this angry young man who feels rejected by his father, and like that part they got through.
Yeah.
The rest with the Borg stuff, it was just so confusing. And yeah, it's reusing the Borg again. It just feels lazy. I mean, they could have picked any number of different things. The bug species from season one, the season one story arc was about the fact that high-ranking members of Starfleet have apparently been replaced, and you shouldn't trust anyone.
Conspiracy,
conspiracy, and that was peppered throughout season one. There were a few points where that was kind of mentioned, and which came to a head with that terrible rubber dummy and the creature that popped out of them when they melted them with the phasers.
Yeah. Oddly grotesque for the TV of that time as well.
Oh yeah. And of course that ominous ending to season one, where it's like the signal has been sent somewhere else in the galaxy, saying like it's a beacon.
Yeah.
And they never touched on that again in the series. This would have been a perfect time.
Yeah.
To kind of bring them back, even though the whole high-ranking members of Starfleet have been replaced trope has been done before.
And better.
We've seen other species planning to do it, like species 8472 in the Delta Quadrant. They had that entire fake Starfleet Academy where they were practicing being human so that they could infiltrate. Like it's.
They put it in Voyager's path.
Yeah, exactly. So Voyager just happened to be flying through. Though they did say they had several of them, and Voyager did explain that they picked up signals that they thought were Federation, which is why they veered off course to go investigate. So they at least gave a little bit of expository dialogue to explain why they happened to find this perfect thing for the plot. But everything felt sort of cycled. And Jack with the Borg didn't work for me.
No.
I would have, the second we found out there were changelings involved, I thought that perhaps Jack had some connection to the Great Link, and that like one thing we never see are the actual founders. Like we see Vatican and her splinter group of changelings, but we never actually see the original founders. They don't come and get involved or try to clean up the mess caused by members of their species who are running around doing terrorist attacks. We see that one picture of Odo on a pad, and like that's it.
Yeah. Almost as if the fact that he's no longer with us was a tad too awkward, so they didn't really put a great amount of effort into any kind of particular cameo.
Yeah, and I mean, I would have been okay, I think, with them bringing in a different actor to be Odo, under the explanation that it's been 30 years, Odo's been back with his people. He's just learned how to shapeshift better, and he can choose his own identity now. And so he chooses a different identity. And that was the thing with the changelings. They could be whatever they wanted. And that was one of the things that Odo learned throughout his story arc, was that he didn't have to just be Odo. He could be anything he wanted. And that was like the gift of being a changeling. So they could have brought the character back, and I would have understood it because Renee is no longer with us, that they couldn't do that. But I wouldn't have felt bad about it, unless there may be people who are like, well, he's dead, we need to retire the character.
I think with something like that they can't win no matter what they do, because if they did give Odo a bigger role with a different actor, there would have been people like yourself and I who would have said, oh, okay, that's a reasonable explanation as to why you've done that. And then you'll have the people who vehemently hate anything new Trek, and I fall on both sides of the fence with that one. Who would say, no, that's disrespecting the original actor. You're always going to have that problem when you go to recast after someone's untimely passing. But you're quite right. The Borg Jack connection. The only thing that makes sense is his connection to Picard, and then subsequently Picard's connection to the Borg. That's the only way you can make it work. But you have to build such a foundation with that in order to get these different story elements out of it, and to explain away a lot of the problems that would naturally occur with that. I'm not just talking about nanosperm, as it would, I suppose it would have been called, creating Jack. That you're talking about other consequences as well. There's no in-depth explanation as to why they chose that route. I thought the whole shapeshifter thing was reused, and I thought. And I did watch. I either watched a review. It was both happened. I watched a review from Dave Cullen, and I had a comment from Dave Cullen on my channel. It's one of my proudest moments, because I'm just a dopey little YouTuber in the corner of YouTube going, "Excuse me, watch my videos," that sort of thing. Yeah. And for him to comment on my videos was absolutely fantastic. And he says, there are things coming, and in his reviews, he said, that Vadik isn't. She's part of the story, but she's not the be all and end all. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And I thought when I saw that, I thought, wow, that's really good. If she's not the main villain, and they go in another direction, I wonder what they'll do. Will it be the Par-Wraiths, which is indicated early on? Would it be, perhaps Species 8472? Would it be a completely new enemy? Please, not the artificial intelligence from season 1, please. But would it be something a little bit more compelling than, oh, it's the Borg again? Oh, good Lord. And, this has just come to my mind. The reusing of elements from other Star Trek and other shows. I haven't, and I have to admit to this, I've not watched Battlestar Galactica in its entirety. But again, I had an absolute slew of comments saying, Battlestar Galactica, all the ships connected, and that there's again something that's just been ripped from another source.
Oh God, and that whole connection thing just. It doesn't even make sense. Like even if you, okay, let me get my thoughts in order here.
No worries.
Starfleet was based off of the U.S. military or the Navy.
Yes.
Because Roddenberry served.
He did.
And so it was based off that. And you can see that carried through into TNG, their ranks, their chain of command, and everything like that. Could you go to a naval admiral right now and say, let's wire all the battleships together, all the planes together, all following one guy playing on on a keyboard or something. Would that be a sound tactical decision today? It wouldn't be a sound tactical decision today, because if everything is following commands from one source, then all you have to do is attack one source, and now you've got command of everything. And that would be an incredibly poor move today to do something like that. So you would think that it would be a bad move 400 years from now. And at one point they said, like, here's the other thing. The formation really bothered me. I couldn't recognize it. I was trying to see the pattern, and somebody commented on one of your videos saying it was the Borg language or the Borg symbols.
Yeah.
And that's where I think I saw it from. And I hadn't been able to go and find an example of like Borg language to see that, but they were already in that formation before the Borg took over.
Yeah.
So that didn't make sense. And then the whole line of sight thing. So as long as they couldn't see the Titan, it's like, you do realize that if anybody has ever watched Star Trek, they don't use line of sight communication. They use a kind of magical technology called subspace.
Subspace, yeah. And I'll tell you something, subspace has got to be one of the best explanations for anything communications related in Star Trek. In any kind of science fiction. Yeah, because subspace is this I suppose in some ways it's a MacGuffin. It's a way to explain away any technical problems, technobabble and all of that stuff. Subspace is great because you've got instantaneous communication between starships, and although Voyager couldn't use subspace to communicate with Earth in real time, it's a domain that's not affected by the laws of physics. It's underneath.
Or it has its own laws.
Exactly.
There are delays. The further there, it does take time for subspace signals to go, but that time is stretched across much greater distances. So
exactly.
You can have an instant call between Vulcan and Earth, but you couldn't have an instant call between the Delta Quadrant and Earth. It would take too long. The signal would get lost in the noise, etc. And that's fine. It's its own realm with its own laws, and they exploit it as best they can.
Yes.
And given that even since TOS era, subspace has been the method of communication to get around the faster than light limit, or the light speed limitations in our communication technology, it would make sense that all the ships in Starfleet would use that for this joint fleet thing. I don't even remember what they called it, what stupid buzzword they had, buzz phrase for that. But even then, subspace isn't line of sight. Cloaked ships can still use subspace, I believe. They just can't fire while cloaked.
Yeah, this is true. Additionally to that, it shares a lot of similarities with one of the bigger problems that I had with season 1 of Picard. You know, when Riker comes warping out with 256 of the copy and pasted ships. I'm sorry. If I was okay, so I'm, I don't know, a rear admiral in charge of ship construction. Yeah, I'm going to say, or am I going to say, see that ship? I want 256 of those ships. Okay, yeah, we'll build 256 of those ships. You've got 256 of an identical ship. And then this lowly ensign goes, sir, what is it? There's a bit of a flaw in my design. It turns out there's this little hole that if you fire a torpedo into it, the whole thing blows up. And you would, if you just wouldn't do it. Again, it's not a sound tactical decision. Yeah. It's not a sound tactical plan. Do not create 256 of the same starship. So Star Trek has such wide variety of starships simply because they're different types of vessels for different things. You wouldn't have 256 Defiants simply because the amount of the logistical nightmare of keeping those ships afloat. I mean, the Defiant was an overpowered ship, but you would also, it's not it's not a viable ship of exploration. You need the different classes for diversity. Yes, you can say that the Nebula class, for example, there was a problem because it couldn't separate, and it had its warp nacelles were too close to the saucer section. So if a warp nacelle blew out, half the saucer section would be destroyed. Or you could explain away all these different technical problems with every type of starship, but you wouldn't have the same type of starship 256 times.
No,
because if all it took was the Romulans to say, "There's a hole in the shields there. It's on every single one. Just aim for that." And that's another problem that the writers have repeated in this one. Well, let's have everything. Let's create a monumental weakness that could destroy the entire fleet, or allow it to be taken over, and then we'll just not explain it away.
Yeah, and I mean, you want to see it done better, and you think about it, like how much better the effects are today, like the ability to create visuals, to create details that were unheard of. But you go back and watch like the final season of Deep Space Nine, the battle episodes, the variety of ships, both on the enemy side and on the Federation side. If they brought out a fleet weakness like the Breen weapon that could just completely depower ships, that just by sheer happenstance, Klingon ships weren't affected. So they had an explanation. They could still save themselves, and then they could research and try and fix that, whatever that problem is, or build in a countermeasure. It's just clearly whoever wrote this has never been in the military.
No.
And I haven't been in the military ever. And I'm not a big fan of military films, but I've absorbed enough to realize like things that are bad tactically.
Yeah.
And things that just wouldn't make any sense. You wouldn't do this because XYZ. And maybe this comes from being a software developer, but normally in my industry, what you do is you've got an idea, a solution to a problem. You gather up a group of people, you put the solution forward, and you say, tell me what's wrong with this. Find the problems with it. Because you don't want to waste your time doing something that isn't going to work. If somebody in the back is going to be like, you didn't think of blah, and that's going to make the whole thing not work. So you kind of do this. A lot of writing in modern TV shows, especially these revival series, they don't do, it seems like that process doesn't happen. Nobody puts forward an idea, and there's like no writer's room. There's no writer's room where there's 10 people there being like, what if Worf all of a sudden loves peace? Nobody's like, well, that's not consistent with like his kid. Nobody's in the room saying, well, wait, you got to explain how this happens. You got to do whatever. They don't. Worf just shows up and he's basically a hippie Klingon who will still chop people's heads off because that's cool. Yeah. And I feel like it's low effort writing. It's like, we got this idea, let's just run with it and let's not think about it.
It's also very telling that they just don't know the characters. It's been put in the hands of, again, Terry Matalas aside for a second. We don't know his level of involvement. We know he was the showrunner. We don't know how much of him is actually in there. But you can tell that when they are dealing with these characters that have just been in endless seasons of television in terms of Star Trek, and you've got this entire universe that you've set up, you cannot cherry pick from that. You can't do it because everything's interconnected. Everything connects to another piece, to another strand. It's like the episode Tapestry, one of the great Star Trek Next Generation episodes. I love Tapestry. I think it's a fantastic episode. If you pull at one thread, the whole thing unravels. If you pull on one thread and try and take one story element, it's so interconnected with everything else. It's very difficult to make it make sense in your story if you don't know what you're talking about. And this is why writers, as you know better than I do, need to do their research. Because if they don't, they're writing something that's just not going to make a lick of sense.
Yes, exactly. And it's the cherry picking too that bugs me, because there's a ton of lore that could have been utilized, or that they kind of left out. There is a TNG episode where I can't remember the name. I think it's TNG, where Alexander from the future comes back to try and
Oh
make young
yeah.
Alexander, and he explains that in the future Worf is like an ambassador,
Yes.
and I did Deep Space Nine end with that, because Martok is the Chancellor. Did he make Worf an ambassador?
Yes.
And I would have assumed Worf would have still been in that role, and that after 30 years of having to be more diplomatic, that would temper his warrior spirit a bit, because it's more about arguing with words and thinking than about going and chopping people's heads off with batleths.
Mm.
And that would have, I think, been better than just, oh, remember in season 7, Deanna taught me some meditation routines, and now that's made me wonderful. No, that's like, you've got other lore you could have drawn on to have changed the character's behavior over time and explained that evolution. I would have kept him an ambassador, how he was working for Starfleet security or intelligence,
Yeah.
while at the end of Deep Space Nine, he's back living with the Klingons,
Mm.
and they're not a part of the Federation, or they haven't said what became of the Klingon Empire, if they joined the Federation or not. Like, and you think that they're not asking these questions, but then you have Riker making all these, the character calling out so much of what Worf is doing, and you're like, well, yeah, like, do you even hear yourself? It's like, yes, that's what the audience is asking too.
Yeah.
Like, clearly somebody was aware of this, unless it was like one writer writing Worf dialogue and one writer writing Riker dialogue, and there was no crosstalk between them. It just, here's my Worf lines, you write some Riker lines, and then we'll.
No, yeah, absolutely. Worf, as someone's put in the chat, hi Reva, nice to see you again. He's put in the chat, Worf was played for laughs far too much. Now, Worf always had some comical moments, but they were better off rare, because when they did appear, they were immensely funny, because he was so stoic and so sort of, stiff, that when something amusing happened and he didn't get it, that was the butt. He was the butt. That was the butt of the joke, and
Yeah.
you were able to sort of laugh because he's almost too stoic for his own good. They play,
or how as an outside observer he would make some remark about humanity or human customs or human beverages, like prune juice being the drink of a warrior.
Yeah.
Like it's so ridiculous from our perspective that it's funny, even when he plays it straight. But you're right. Mm. Yeah, it was completely, everything he did was kind of just for laughs. And yeah,
and I don't really get his I suppose you could call it relationship with Rafi. But I can't stand Rafi. Rafi, just saying her name causes me a great mental headache. Rafi. I hate Rafi.
There's a children's singer. When I was a kid, there's a children's singer. I don't know if he's Canadian, named Rafi.
I know. He sang
a whole bunch of songs, and so every time I hear that name, that's the first thing I think of, because that's the first Rafi I've ever.
Didn't he do Banana Phone? I'm sure he did Banana Phone. I'm sure that was Rafi. And whenever I think of Rafi, I just go ring, 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 Banana Phone. Anyway, but no, the character of Rafi sucked throughout 2 seasons of this show. Now, yeah, I agree with some of the other YouTubers, Dave Cullen, Drinker, and all of them. She had a much better season this time round. But I think she was oddly paired with Worf, because she was she'd obviously gotten clean and she was working with Starfleet intelligence, but I found those scenes with her, in particular her on her own, she's still got the La Sirena, hasn't she? She's still got that ship, Rios' ship. Yeah. She's on her own, and it felt a little flat. I'm not going to lie, for me, those scenes felt a little flat. and then they pair her up with Worf, and it just seems so unlikely that I mean, I don't know. I can't really put my finger on it, but I think they were. I don't think they were as well matched as they were made out to have been.
See, the Worf involvement, they could have explained it better if Ro Laren had her suspicions about Starfleet. Mm-hmm. Not being able to trust anyone, she reaches out to the one person from the Enterprise she knows wouldn't be involved with anything Starfleet, which is Ambassador Worf.
Yes.
And then gets him involved. And however you drag Rafi into that mess. But I mean, at least they could have established that relationship, and that would have been better writing. You would have been like, that makes sense. She's not trusting anyone in Starfleet. She knows Worf. Worf's in the Empire. She can get him to look into things or to kind of run an investigation without Starfleet being aware of it. Mm. If they had said that, that would have been, I think, a much better explanation. And maybe that just didn't make the cut because it wasn't explodey enough, or you couldn't turn your brain off long enough to follow it. But like there's a missed opportunity, and like a lot of new Trek, there's a lot of missed opportunities where you're like, you watch it and been like, wow, it would have been better if it had played out this way, or it would have made more sense if it had played out this way. You could still end up with the same result. You just could have written it better so that it was more consistent with the universe and the lore. Bringing Rafi in as like the very last scene with Rafi is about her saying that somebody leaked all her top secret intelligence commendations, and it's being, her face and all her commendations are being projected, across the world. It's kind of like when all of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s data was dumped, and ScarJo's character, Black Widow,
yes,
all the information about her was made public and stuff, and that it's like, yeah, I'm sure as a Starfleet intelligence operative, she probably did some not very good stuff. She wouldn't necessarily want enemies to know that, oh, she had infiltrated this gang or this foreign government or anything. But I was reflecting on that scene, and I'm wondering, so are they retconning Rafi that all of the problems with her were that she was a deep undercover agent who got addicted to the drugs while she was being a narc, and that all these top secret intelligence commendations reveal that for the whole time that everybody thought she was just this burned out druggie, she's actually been this intelligence operative who, yes, struggled with addiction, but she's been doing all this cool stuff. We just never saw it. They're revealing it now, and she's restored to everybody's good graces automatically because of it. I was wondering if that's what they were doing, because why the heck would they put her back into a first officer's position by the end of the season?
Yeah.
Given that if she was on La Sirena, well, then that was a private ship. Like Rios, that wasn't a Starfleet vessel. That was Rios's ship. She was still out of Starfleet after she had been fired along with Picard. And then that could explain why the firing didn't make sense. Oh, you worked for Jean-Luc, you're getting fired too after he resigns.
Yeah.
That didn't make any sense. If the thing was, we're firing you as a cover for bringing you into Starfleet intelligence so you could do all this great stuff. But then again, they didn't say any of that. But if they had said some of that, that would have made this last bit made more sense, or at least made the Rafi character better.
One flashback would have been all it had taken.
Yeah.
One flashback where you could have Seven speaking to Worf. It's like, how long have you and Rafi been working together? And he could just simply say one word, well, and then it flashes back to the scene where she gets fired. And then all it takes is for them to film one scene in an office where she's brought in and saying, "You're fired from Starfleet," or you are hereby cashiered out of Starfleet. We want you to work in intelligence.
Yeah, or even better, which would have made everything better, especially season 1, would be if in the flashback, Ro Laren is already suspecting Starfleet at the events of the Romulan evacuation thing when Picard resigns. She's already talked to Worf, who's an ambassador, maybe on an embassy on Earth. So when Rafi gets fired, she gets invited to the embassy where Worf then recruits her and brings her into to everything. And then all of a sudden now she's not this crappy character that they introduced in season 1 to be like, oh, this is just a regular 21st century meth addict living in a trailer in the desert, which seems so stupid for how they portray Earth in the future.
It's got my trailer. I've got a trailer in Vasquez Rocks.
Yeah,
in the 24th century.
World hunger. We solved world hunger 200 years ago, but I'm living in a trailer.
She may as well just have had a pair of sunglasses on, a tombola hat, and just sat there going, sinister, sinister. It made no sense. I mean, again, you could in that flashback you could have had Worf saying, if they hadn't have had the "screw you, Jean-Luc" moment, they could have quite easily had Worf or Rolarin saying, "Look, you've worked with Jean-Luc. We need you to put as much distance as possible, and I mean berate him. Make it very clear you don't want anything to do with him. It's going to protect him in the future." You know, that you could put these little nuances in, these little explanations to explain why she is such an appallingly bad character. How far that explanation would get you through season 1 and season 2 is something for a deeper thought. But it may have worked. I mean, at the end of the day, your theory on the changelings and everything, although it wasn't stated and it wasn't generally implied, it still works. To me, that still works. You know, the whole start of Starfleet dynamic changing and them becoming quite xenophobic, rather than or the Federation becoming xenophobic, rather than this united Federation of planets, because of the changeling problem. It was post DS9 when it happened. It would have made absolute perfect sense. And again, this season was, I think, instead of taking the previous 2 seasons and what they actually did with that was say, well, that was a bunch of shit. We know it was a bunch of shit. Pardon my French, but so we're gonna write something else, and we're gonna call it snidely call it shit. Instead of going, you know what, you guys have created a serious problem. You've written season 1, and you've drawn season 2 with a crayon, which they did. I still can't get my head around it. So I've now got season 3 to round off this hellish hellscape you created. Are you kidding me? I've got to solve this. Fine. You know what I'm going to do? I'll solve it, but you give me the rights to use season 1 and season 2, and I'll try and explain it away. And then he could have sat down and okay, what are the biggest problems? Rafi's a big problem. The AI's a big problem. The androids are a problem. You know, what happened with Utopia and Benicia? The Federation's a problem. They've created the Federation as a problem. And then all it takes is a few lines of dialogue for each situation to just correct it, to explain it away. Okay, yes, a lot of it won't make sense. It depends on how much time you've got to do it. But you could do it. And you could round off, have the finale of Picard explain away the faults of season 1 and 2, instead of sticking their middle finger up at it. Which I've done many times. Let's not split hairs here. I've done it. I've given Picard season 1 and 2 the middle finger. A lot of people have. But you could repair it. But it would take some time and some effort and some thought. And season 3, I don't think had enough thought. Its heart was in the right place.
Yeah.
But the thought wasn't there. Let's try and be clever here. Instead of forcing forcing nostalgia on people. Please like it, please like it. Look, here's the Enterprise. Please like it, please like it. Remember this. Please like it, please like it. Look, the Geordies rebuilt the Enterprise D. Instead of doing that, saying, right, okay, what do I want? I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that, and I want the Enterprise D at the end. How are we going to get there? Right, we've got to fix season 1 and 2 first.
Yeah. And for most of their fixes, what they did is they watched all the people angrily complaining about seasons 1 and 2 online, and then they just rolled that up into Shaw. Drop Shaw in there, and Shaw's yeah, that stuff with Girardi, that was nonsense, and they're not the real threat. And like that great big giant portal thing that opened at the end of season 2 doesn't get mentioned.
No, oh God, no! It's gone. This ancient AI that made Romulans bash their own heads in with rocks.
Oh, I'm not even talking about that. Remember,
sorry, I do beg your pardon.
The end of season 2, when they needed the Borg to control the fleet,
so
that they could set up a shield for that.
What?
That made absolutely zero sense.
With the enemy from afar.
See it on all these planets. The speed of light. All these different planets, they could see it forming.
It's like the Vulcan black hole all over again, isn't it?
Like, what's even dumber is they let the Borg take over the ship so she could coordinate the fleet. And then what does Starfleet decide to do? Find a way to coordinate the fleet. Like, what?
Hey, that wasn't such a bad idea. Let's do that. I didn't even
the laziest of recycling.
Wow. Yeah. Because I'm sorry, if you were in charge of the Starfleet, the military arm of the Federation, you wouldn't go, hey, you know how the Borg did this and it nearly, we nearly got destroyed and everything. That sounds like a really good idea. Let's do that again.
Yeah, and even if you could argue that Girardi's Borg's intentions weren't hostile, despite the fact that she couldn't explain them, she was just like, give me control of the ships. I'm not going to say you're in danger or I'm going to save you. I'm just going to be like, let me start assimilating your ships. Like, you would look at that from an engineering perspective or a software perspective and be like, hey, she got on one ship and then was able to take over the fleet. That's a security hole. We need to have firewalls to prevent, so if one ship gets compromised, it can't control the entire fleet. That's terrible.
I mean, what they did with that, Clayton, is essentially because they bought Shelby out, they had her be the spearhead for this entire operation of the ships all being interconnected like a Borg, and that is the highest level of concentration the writers have. They went, we need the ships to all to be interconnected, and we're gonna have it be Shelby's idea. Well, why would it be Shelby's idea? Because Borg. Because she's the expert on the Borg. She'd think that was a bloody good idea. Let's have the ships operate via interplexing beacon.
Exactly.
Well, why would she do that? Well, because she likes the Borg. She doesn't like the Borg. She's made herself the Borg expert. And she would know that would be a terrible, terrible, terrible thing to do. But I'll just do it anyway. Yeah. And I'm sorry, but the thing that bugged me, and we will in this stream, no doubt, to get to things that we did like. But the things that what bugged me is the lack of gravitas when they killed characters that we know.
Oh God!
For argument's sake, I've just been talking about Shelby.
Yeah.
Shelby wasn't a huge part of Star Trek, but she was in one of the most popular episodes of The Next Generation, and she was I thought a great go-getter character. I thought she was brilliant. They turned her into a complete idiot, and then shot her.
Yeah. Shot her.
Yeah, just shot her point blank, and that was it.
And her big speech that she gave to, like, a major nitpick I had with it was like she mentions the Enterprise on XO1.
Yes.
That its journeys led to the formation of Starfleet. I'm like, no, Starfleet was the Earth organization that the Enterprise and XO1 belonged to. Yes. And XO1's led to the birth of the Federation. Starfleet just evolved to be the exploration and military arm of the Federation, but it pre-exists the Federation.
Yeah.
Because that's why I think Section 31 is from the Starfleet Charter, which is an Earth thing, not a Federation thing.
Yes.
So like even that's just lazy writing. Like the fact checker didn't catch that.
Exactly. Doesn't Sloan say check article whatever section 31 of the Starfleet Charter, not the Federation Charter, the Starfleet Charter, because Starfleet came first. The Federation wasn't born until years later. And you know, I wanted to say Shelby was played as a bit of an idiot. Because she was, you know, in Picard, she was a bit of an idiot. Was it also her idea? And I said this in one of my reviews, and one of the comments has just reminded me to this fact. Was it her idea to have every single Federation ship that's operational all the way around Earth at the same time? One of my biggest... Another big frustration with this series. Let's just have the entire fleet around Earth. All interconnected, all able to be controlled by one source, right next to the heart of the Federation. Well, who's defending the neutral zone? Who, if the neutral zone even exists anymore? Who's defending the borders of the Federation? Who's exploring?
Exactly.
Whenever there was a big event in Star Trek, and Starfleet had a day honouring this, people would do what we do. We don't all congregate into one city. The whole population of the Earth doesn't go to New York to celebrate freaking New Year. We watch it on TV, and it always shows people on these starships saying, "Oh, did you hear such and such a ceremony's happening? Okay, put it on the view screen. Let the whole crew watch." And they'd all stand there watching in proud celebration. But no, we've got to have every... It's just absolutely rotten. And it's these things like this that have really made me think. Now, I don't want to call anybody out. This is not what this stream's about. But how can honest reviewers say that this was good in that sense? I mean, okay, yes, well, I got lost in the member berry fever. I did. I snapped out of it because week by week I was able to stop and think about what I was seeing. But these YouTubers and these reviewers, I mean, forget early access for a moment. Just put it to one side. Why? How could you say it was good when when we stop and think about it? When we're having a conversation about it, about the intricacies of the story and how it references previous, how can they call it a good original story? To me, it makes no sense. I can't say, in all honesty, if you were to say, look, it's not good. I'm going to say it's not good in the sense of it's not good Star Trek, but it's a beautiful, beautiful tribute to the next generation. It's the best tribute you're going to get for the next generation, but it's still badly written. What's the harm in just being honest and saying, right, okay, yeah, it's good. They used that cop-out that I talked about in the previous stream. Oh, it's got its problems, but it's actually very good. It's not. It's there's 1,000 plot holes.
Yeah.
It's so bizarre to me. I don't want to just go off on one saying, oh, they bought out their shills. They got early access privileges and they don't want to lose it again. If that's the case, then that's their channel. They can do what they want with that. That's up to them. Okay? But don't turn around and say something's really good if you're just going to get paid to say, I don't understand. I can't do that on my channel. It's probably why my channel is never going to be a huge success. Is because I'm very honest with what I think about things when I'm thinking about them. And people like yourself can come along and say, hang on a minute, Richard, stop, think. And this is why I love reading the comments, because people say, stop for a minute, think about what you're watching. And it helps me to go, you're right, I got caught up in the whole nostalgia juice of what they were serving me, that I didn't stop to think. I mean, the back of episode 6, mate, I was buzzing, and it showed in my review. It was as biased as it comes. I was blown away. The light went green, and I was just like, wow, I was really, really coming off that with a lot of high, good energy, you know. And then I had to stop after that and think, why? If I go back and rewatch it, what's that explanation? Is the explanation good enough for why 7 of 9's giving Jack the damn tour of the museum? Where's the foundation for that conversation? There's no foundation whatsoever. It's a conversation that doesn't seem to happen naturally. 7 decides to, you know, give him history and like a museum guide on all these ships and how important they were to the Star Trek universe. Well, 7 of 9 served on one ship, tried to apply for Starfleet, and then she was denied and became a Fenris Ranger. We'll get to them at some point as well. She'd have all this information, but it's like, Jack, correct me if I'm wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But there was no fluidity to that conversation whatsoever. It was a chance for Jack representing people who don't watch Star Trek and seem to like New Trek, and 7 was sort of a metaphor for long-time fans, saying, hey, remember this good time? And they're going, yeah, I don't remember that. I've not seen that, but that seems very interesting. It seems like a lot of the characters were simply put there to represent the different personalities of the fans, the different areas of fandom, and newbies. But I don't want to see that. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to watch good stories, creative stories, original stories. I don't want to see stuff again. Like, you know, I don't want to see story elements from stuff I've seen before. You can reintroduce characters and do something new with them. But it just seemed to me like there was no thought put into that entire sequence at all, other than to sit there like two old gits reminiscing about the past. And
you know what would have made that scene more organic? Not have 7 in it. Have Jack and LaForge's daughter there. Yeah. And Jack would be like, what is this place? Where are we? And she's like, my dad, this is the Fleet Museum. My dad runs it. Like, it's full of cool old ships. Let me show you some of them.
Yeah.
And he could be like, oh yeah, I've heard of that, or whatever. And that would flow more organically than just 7 of 9 being like, let's see how well you know your ships, and starts.
My dad made a point, you know. My dad made a point of teaching me the history about every starship because he's the curator of the Fleet Museum. So I've picked up all this stuff, and he is because he's into her. Why didn't he say, "Go ahead, give me a tour then. Tell me about these ships." Boom! You've got your nostalgia moment there, and there was a logical progression to get there. Boom! Problem solved. I genuinely think we need to do a collaboration video. Fix Star Trek Picard season 3. But there's your natural progression. There. Problem solved instantly. Have LaForge's daughter do it, because you know, Dad's your father and my father, they no doubt have at some point told us in-depth details about their favourite things and what they've done and what they liked. You know, my dad was constantly talk about steam engines, steam trains. He loved them. He loved them. And I unfortunately know more about steam trains than I do certain other subjects because he would tell me. And drag racing. Oh my God, he used to sit and we used to sit and watch drag racing together. I could tell you quite a lot about drag racing because he's told me. So yeah, naturally, the explanation would make sense because LaForge would have essentially just gone, "Now let me tell you a story about when I was younger and all these famous ships." Natural progression, natural ebb and flow. Good explanation, not just a character that is nothing like what she used to be. Just giving this random explanation with a smirk on her face, kind of again representing probably people who love the member berries. Here's a satisfying moment. Boom.
You know, I think since we're on the topic of the Fleet Museum, and a thought came into my head, I don't want to lose it. Mm-hmm. I think this season dragged a bit with the cat and mouse stuff with the Titan and Vadic. Mm-hmm. I think what could have been better and what would have made for probably much more enjoyable is if earlier in the season they find out about the plot to control all the ships with the new fleet maneuver. Have that fleet or that connected fleet thing brought out earlier, and then what you do is they realize what's about to happen. They can't get through to anyone, and they say the Titan is going to be affected. It's up to modern specs. We need a ship that is older and not connected to the current network. And they'll be like, okay, now we have a reason to go see Geordi at the Fleet Museum because that's where all the older ships are. And that's where Geordi reveals that he's been rebuilding the D. And we get the Enterprise D for a few more episodes rather than just at the very end. And then they get to go back into action with the ship to do more stuff, maybe have some more fights before they get back to Earth. But everything at the end felt so rushed. They had to fit in the Enterprise D. They had to do the Millennial Falcon Death Star scene with the Borg cube. And I know the Falcon didn't do the Death Star scene. They dragged out Vadic for so long. They could have given us more Enterprise D, and it would have felt better. I think even like you think how good it felt to see the Enterprise D, the original bridge. It would have been great if they had rebuilt the engineering set. Geordi and Data turn the warp drive back on and see the pulsing blue light and everything. Yeah. But I guess they only had the money for whatever
the bridge.
the bridge. But if they had given us more Enterprise D, it would have been more exciting, I think.
And like you say, more logical because you've just explained exactly why they would need these older ships.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that just logically don't make sense. The Vadic taking a detour to pick up Deanna because they knew that Riker was going to be the one they were going to capture. I was positive that Deanna was a changeling because it didn't make any sense that they'd have her. They were trying to capture everyone, but everybody got away except Riker. So they got Riker, and then he's like, I'm not going to turn on Jean-Luc Picard for anything. And she's like, okay, well, look at this. We happen to have your wife behind door number 2, and now you're going to, now we have leverage. That's so contrived. Everything had to fall into place perfectly for that to happen. Deanna should have been a changeling, and they could have gone and rescued her at some point.
Not only that, but if you are wanting to convince Will Riker to turn on a friend he's had for 20 gazillion years or whatever, it doesn't matter. If you wanted to really force the truth out of him, all you would need is a 24 moment with something that looks like Deanna. It wouldn't need to be Deanna. It wouldn't even need to be a changeling. It could be a hologram for all he cares. We've got Deanna. She's the empath. He's not an empath. He wouldn't know the difference between fake Deanna and real Deanna. And all she'd have to do is put a blaster to the hologram of Deanna and say, "You'll tell us everything we want to know, or kiss goodbye to your wife."
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
10, 9, 8, 7, and that would literally have to be it. But it's the old Dr. Evil thing, isn't it? I'm going to give them a plan to easily escape, and
Yeah.
that's it. And
Yep.
so, like, you're right, so many episodes were wasted on the Vadik thing, making. It's kind of like, oh, she's the big bad, she's the big bad, she's the big bad. Oh, no, she's talking to the big bad. She's not the big bad, she's not the big bad, she's not the big bad. Oh, she's dead. And now you've got 2 episodes of compressed crap you've got to get out. You're right, the D should have been there to, halfway through the season. But, we wanted to drag out the, I'm sorry, mate, but the Worf and Rafi stuff on Planet Blade Runner or Metalis 3 or whatever it was called. And the whole fascination with doing a Blade Runner-esque background or Blade Runner-esque city, somewhere that's dodgy, dark, neon lights everywhere. Everyone's dealing drugs. People are taking drugs in the street. It's a lawless civilization. They're pardon my turn of phrase here, but their absolute hard-on for that stuff is frustrating as hell. Why spend 3 to 4 episodes with Rafi trying to uncover the truth? Dealing with these gangsters and everything. It was... I hate that aspect. It served no purpose to the story other than to give them a few tidbits of information that they could have got otherwise.
And for an entire season built upon member berries, everything that happened with Rafi and Worf has been the least memorable part of the season. I couldn't even tell you what they were doing. At one point, Worf chopped off a Ferengi's head, and then they were wearing mobile emitters.
Yes.
At some point, and
they dealt with a Vulcan gangster, the most logical kind of gangster you can come across.
Not everywhere in the Federation is perfect. They say that like the outer lying worlds often still have problems with gangs or criminal elements and stuff like that. But it just seems like it's everywhere. Like every planet has you can probably find a slum on Risa where they're dealing drugs and and it's very Blade Runner-esque. Yes, it's Cloud City was like that. Was that the name? Not Cloud City.
Free Cloud. Free Cloud.
Free Cloud.
Yeah, the world's most ridiculous name for a planet. The Apple service is great there. No, you're quite right. It's like Star Wars is Outer Rim, isn't it? On the Outer Rim. The Republic doesn't extend to the Outer Rim, so we'll just place our story in the Outer Rim. Lawless societies.
Yeah. Firefly, like that too.
Exactly. But it doesn't work for Star Trek. How does that work for Star Trek? The Federation is a character of Star Trek. I would say the main character of any Star Trek show is the Federation, because it's a fundamental principle, the basis for which you're setting your story. You change that, you make something very different from Star Trek. And you've got these wonderful characters that have hope and optimism. They're not always, otherwise we wouldn't have great stories with them. But Picard giving everyone such tragedy in their life, you've got Picard who goes to his vineyard to die. You've got Riker and Troy who lose a son. You've got 7 of 9 who loses Echep. You've got Rafi who loses everything, apparently. It just becomes trailer trash near Vasquez Rocks. You've got Rios, who loses his ship and his crew, and there's so much tragedy there.
And his mind at some point.
And yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Everything. You've got Jurati, who, as far as I can tell, only really sort of loses her position at Daystrom. She got fired. Sorry, she got fired from Daystrom for calling B4 a bad copy. That's what she got fired for.
Well, she also killed what's his face?
Bruce Maddox. Yeah.
Bruce Maddox. Yeah.
Oh God. Oh, she's just.
Has this television series not been like? It's almost a trope with it. Like if you see a character from an old series, they're dead. It's like the Murder She Wrote of Star Trek, because every time you see somebody, it's like, oh no, they brought Tuvok. He's that's not going to be Tuvok. Real Tuvok's dead. Or there's Icheb. Hi, oh no, Icheb, what happened?
Icheb, my favorite character from Icheb. Oh wow, and he's dead.
Like I said, I was expecting them to bring back Neelix just so the Borg Queen could burst from his chest. Like
yeah. Yeah.
What okay? The communication that Vadic was having with the big bad. What the heck was that? Was that the Borg Queen? It looked like a Talaxian. It looked like a flaming Talaxian. Like it was.
It looked like, from what I could tell, because she. The thing is, you could say it was the Borg Queen, but what about her having to cut her own hand off for it to morph into this changing type thing? And you clearly talking. She's clearly talking to another changeling, because that you would expect that's how they'd probably be able to communicate. They could have retconned that in. Why would she have to cut a piece of herself off to speak to the Borg Queen? That makes no sense. So who was she talking to if not the Borg Queen? Oh well, it was the Borg Queen. But why would she have to do that if she wasn't talking to another changeling?
And the Borg are capable of using like subspace transmissions. Why would they need whatever that was?
Yeah.
Like it was designed to obfuscate. Like I mean that was to hide the Borg as the villain, but by doing so, there's no way for you to look back and be like, I missed that clue that was the Borg. There is no clue. It was a complete red herring.
Well, what about this? If see if this tracks in your head, because it's tracking in mine right now, and I've not split myself up yet to try and get rid of it. What if instead of it being the Borg Queen or being the Borg period, why not have it so the Borg tried to assimilate the rogue changelings? The rogue changelings broke off from the Founders, wanted to destroy Starfleet, ran across, the Borg ran into them, tried to assimilate them. Something happened when they tried to assimilate them. And the changelings managed to take over the cube because they were able to shapeshift their way throughout the cube and take over it. The Borg collective having been decimated by Voyager anyway, if you were to take that particular point of view. Borg decimated, the shapeshifters take control of the Borg, and instead of it being an alliance, why not just be a takeover? And have the Borg Queen fighting with the shapeshifter, the Borg Queen consciousness fighting with the shapeshifter that's been assimilated, or something of that manner, and then have her control through the changelings. That way, you explain how she's able to communicate with Vadic through Vadic's hand being chopped off. You know, there's potential there, I think, for them to have told a more compelling story. And instead of having it be a Borg revenge story, make it the changeling revenge story, but have the Borg as the vessel to do that.
Yeah.
Does that?
And they'd be essentially copying the Jurati Borg Queen duality from season 2, and you know they love just copying.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be derivative, but it would explain why or who she was talking to.
And you know what? That would work better too if they learned about Picard and Jack through the Borg, because the Borg don't innovate; they assimilate.
Yes.
So they, even if they're aware that Jack has this connection, the Borg wouldn't necessarily be able to come up with this plan. But these changelings, if they had access to that information, they could see it as a way to now infiltrate with their combined ability. Like everything seems like this was the Borg Queen's plan. She finds these changelings, she gets them to infiltrate Starfleet, put in the transporter code so that all the young kids, because the old people aren't going to be affected for reasons.
We'll get to that.
Y7 wasn't affected, or Picard himself wasn't affected. Who knows? Because he had the stupid thing in his head that he passed on to Jack. Why wasn't he taken over? But it makes less sense that the Borg came up with a plan, because the Borg doesn't come up with a plan. The Borg just assimilates, and their plan is to spread and assimilate. They don't have plans beyond that, except for Dark Frontier, where the Borg Queen showed Seven a plan they had to disperse nanoprobes throughout Earth's atmosphere.
Yeah.
To do a long-term infection or assimilation.
Yeah, assimilation virus, essentially, wasn't it?
Yeah, so that by the time anybody would notice, it'd be too late. They'd already be infected, which is kind of what I thought of when they said that this had been in the works for a long time, that this was like that plan or some variation of that plan.
Well, you see, the changelings and the Borg share some similarities with the way they operate. You know, the ocean becomes the drop becomes the ocean, and the Borg are all interconnected. So it would have been a far more logical story to have been in the Borg's final attempt to assimilate one last species, for them to ironically trying to assimilate a changeling, and there's some kind of weird hybrid that forms, with a Borg that can shapeshift. How freaky would that be? But but at the same,
and you know how they could have explained that too, because the founders are all the way in the Gamma Quadrant, but the founders also sent out, what was it, like 100 infants into the universe.
Odo was one.
We know about Odo. We know about Loss.
Yes.
And then the rest are somewhere out there.
That's all it would have taken.
Loss, because Odo would have infected Loss unless he found other changelings. He most likely would have died, because he connected
rather
with
tragically.
Odo
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's never covered. It's a bit awkward.
if a changeling found its way to the Delta Quadrant, or somewhere within a Borg cube, an exploratory Borg cube or something, it might have that would have been a good way to retcon that relationship.
Yeah.
And then you don't even need the torture story.
No.
Vadic's torture story. It would just be a new threat of two old enemies that have combined. I mean, like, the torture was terrible, and I understand it. It's Section 31. They do stuff. Like, it's not like they just sat down, mixed some chemicals in a beaker, and had their virus for Deep Space Nine. What we aren't seeing is what they did to create that bioweapon. And I have no doubt they tortured changelings and did all sorts of experiments on them. I still don't know if that really justifies Vadic going on this "I will destroy Starfleet" spree. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. That's like, it's played by Amanda Plummer, who always plays crazy people. And
naturally, yeah.
So
she's very Amanda Plummer.
It I guess tracks in terms of the fact that it's not a very rational plan. Like, Vadic's revenge isn't based on rationality. Why the Borg would make use of that seems not in character.
Well, if you think about the changelings in general, the changelings have led the Dominion for 1,000 years. The Dominion is an ever-growing force on the other side of the galaxy, stuck behind a wormhole. The Dominion is the changelings. The changelings are the Dominion. Okay, yes, they were beaten in Deep Space Nine, but what on earth makes people think that this enemy that led a vast empire would allow themselves to be used by the Borg?
Yeah.
Why would they suddenly go, you know what, we want to hit the Federation? And the Borg Borg Queen basically just says, you know what, you infiltrate Starfleet for me and I'll make it happen. No. The founders are slaves to no one. The Borg are still solids. They're not to be trusted. And why would the founders, even offshoots, these new ones that hate the Federation so much, they would be like, we can do this anyway. Why would we need the Borg? We can infiltrate Starfleet. We are now better than ever, able to mimic a human. So why would we not use that to bring the Federation to its knees? We don't need the stinking Borg. Let them die. You know, they're absolutely obliterated. They're decimated. We don't need them. They need us. So why would you be subservient to the Borg?
The alliance doesn't make sense.
No.
The changelings don't get anything out of the deal, and in the end, they all pretty much would have been killed by the Borg anyway, because the Borg's first directive when they Borgified the children was eliminate all non-assimilated.
Yeah.
They didn't have except our changeling buddies who are hiding amongst us.
Yeah, I'd never thought of that. There are some caveats. Did we think about how we could detect them?
Well, and you know, I was curious about why Jack could take over Starfleet people, but couldn't take over the bad guys. Like take over one of Vadic's men with a weapon and shoot Vadic right then and there when everybody was held hostage on the bridge. And I guess that gets explained later, because only the children who've gone through the transporter. I call them children because I'm in my 40s and they're in their 20s.
Yeah, they are.
The young adults are the only ones susceptible to this. So it makes sense that Jack could take over LaForge and the other people whose names you don't remember. But then it's like, well, then Jack could use that power to identify anyone who's a changeling, because he wouldn't be able to hear their thoughts or take them over, because they wouldn't have the DNA change and the transporter thing. There's things like that where they give abilities, but then either don't utilize them or limit them in non-consistent ways.
Or just forget they have them in the first place.
The way Jack stormed onto the cube, I thought he was going to take over. Like the Borg Queen is weak and decimated. The cube is falling apart. Like he would have been in there, and it would have been like the is the episode Drone from Voyager, or is it One? I get the two titles confused. Where the Seven's nanoprobes fuse with the Doctor's emitter and create that 29th century Borg.
Yeah.
And he just goes in and assimilates a cube.
Yeah.
Or a sphere.
Yeah.
Because he's just that much more powerful. And I kind of thought that that's what was going to happen. But of course it didn't. She just plugged him in, and the 3 or 4 minds left on the cube, or however many Borg were left alive, were enough to like take him over. And
sorry, but the Borg are how many voices? He even says when Picard goes into his, the virtual reality or whatever it is, Jack says, all these voices, they're all so peaceful and calm and everything's so calm. I'm thinking, well, that's not how I remember the Borg. It's not peaceful and calm, and there are trillions of Borg. What happened to the rest of the Borg? Why are there only a few on a ship that's hiding in Jupiter, which, by the way, wouldn't work? Do we not remember Jupiter Station? Do we not remember, Saturn stations? The solar system's full of space stations.
Yeah, and the Federation has the ability to transport conduits. So even if they snuck a transport conduit into Jupiter's atmosphere, they'd detect it.
Yeah.
They're Starfleet.
and I'm sorry, but they were able to detect a transport conduit from Earth entering the solar system. They're capable of doing it, and I suppose that would fall under line of sight, wouldn't it? Because Saturn was in the way or something daft like that.
Exactly.
But you just wouldn't. You just wouldn't get away with hiding in Jupiter's atmosphere, and isn't it kind of half sticking out?
Initially, when you see it, it's just the antenna array
Yeah.
sticking out,
Yeah.
and then for the big Michael Bay explosion at the end, they've moved out of Jupiter's atmosphere, and you just see Jupiter off to the side a bit, and it's clearly in space, so you get to see the whole cube explode and the Enterprise fly out of the explosion. Because
I think I think, to be fair, the most impressive part about that entire scene, the revelation scene of the Borg ship in Jupiter, was how impressed I was with Picard's eyesight, because I can bloody spot it. He goes, there they are, and you're like, how did you spot that? As soon as they go, magnify, please, for the 80-year-old man, magnify. I can't see them, but that was the most impressive part about that. But the end, the final episode was, and I said this in my review, is so unsatisfactory. For the investment that you've had since the first episode, and you've watched this story unfold. You've spent 7 episodes with Vadik, chasing them, which is just the Wrath of Khan, in a nebula, with elements of Portal and, various other, Das Boat and stuff like that. And you've invested all this time and energy for that 30 minutes. And towards the end of the episode, you get the epilogue. And it very, very, very hastily wraps up everything that it is from season 1 to season 3. Wraps it all up, thinks it's tied it in a neat bow, and then ends with the poker game around the poker table. We'll get into the bonus scene later, but that's precisely where, this is a point I made in my review, that's precisely where we left them in All Good Things.
Yeah.
Why do you need to do that again? I know it's a tribute series, we all know that, but why did you need to go back and do that again? The entire run of Picard is a big circle that ends right back with them playing poker in a bar.
And you know what might have made that, like, I understand that a lot of this season was about setting up a torch passing for the next generation. Rather than just recreate the final scene from All Good Things, maybe they should have had, like, the next generation walk in and ask to join and sit and play with their parents. And so you kind of see the torch being passed. And yes, it was like, from a technical standpoint, it was a beautifully done, like the shot of the poker table, the panning around and everything. But you're right. It aside from being like, oh, that's how they did the old one, or that's how they ended TNG, it didn't add anything. It didn't need to really happen. And
the other thing that bothered me in terms of the passing of the torch, why rename a at this point possibly 30-year-old starship to the name Enterprise, a flagship? Why do that? It was so anticlimactic and so meh.
It was very underwhelming. Oh, extremely. And you, like, when Beverly said to Picard right before the reveal, I know you don't like fanfare, and I'm like, they're calling it the USS Picard.
Yes,
naming the ship after him. He saved the galaxy a million times. They've been beating the crap out of this guy this last 2 seasons. Give him a ship named after him.
Yeah,
he's due one. And then you could continue Star Trek Picard, the series, without Patrick Stewart,
exactly,
because now it would be about the ship.
Like Enterprise, like Voyager, like Deep Space Nine. It made sense. Yeah.
Exactly. And so then, but then just like, oh no, it's the Enterprise G, and I'm like, why would you pull out an older model and call it the next version of the Enterprise.
Yeah.
Just it was like, oh look, the Enterprise is going to continue, but it really no. Start building the new Enterprise.
Yeah.
Start showing it under construction at Utopia Planitia, or whatever, as they fly by the new Enterprise G being built, and then go to the USS Picard.
Yes.
I mean, TNG, and I want to bring this up because they're setting it up so that it's Seven, Rafi, LaForge, Jack Crusher, and all that on this ship. That's a dumb gimmick. TNG, when it aired, wasn't captained by Bobby Kirk and Susie Spock and Johnny Scotty, or Johnny Scott, all the children of the people who served on the last ship called Enterprise.
Or children of Chekhov.
Yeah.
I forgot about that in my review, and I kicked myself because that was a thing as well.
It's silly to imagine the Enterprise G being crewed by the descendants of the Enterprise D.
Yeah.
Like, it's at that point it just kind of over the top.
All they can do. Sorry, mate. All they can do with New Trek is copy and paste and reference. They had a chance with Discovery. They had a chance and they blew it with the first episode, and then everything that came afterwards, because they decided to make Mikey Burnham, Space Jesus, the adopted sister of Spock.
Like, she couldn't even be her own character. She has to be in the shadow.
They couldn't even stand on their own 2 feet. Now, every new series needs a little bit of a boost. We see it with a lot of spin-offs. We saw it with Deep Space Nine. It needed the next gen to come in on occasion. Just have the references. It's still Star Trek. You see, it's still Star Trek because we got this. We got the next generation here. It's still Star Trek. It's still Star Trek. And then Deep Space Nine didn't need that anymore. It sort of had one foot and leapt off and became its own thing. Now, the Discovery didn't do that. It clung to the Star Trek universe and took its nails in, and actually ended up hurting it.
Yeah. Like TNG, the pilot episode of TNG had Admiral McCoy very briefly as a brief cameo, because DeForest Kelley was already a walking skeleton, it looked like at that point.
Oh my god, yeah. I don't think they had any makeup on him, did they?
and then of course the episode Relics. But that happened later. Yeah. And it was still a good episode. I mean, the Dyson Sphere aspect was just awesome. Yeah. It was brilliant eye candy. It had this great mystery. They didn't solve that mystery, but it was a neat thing to come across. And the way they played up Scotty is he was somebody who, and they might have been able to do this better with the TNG cast, which is why they needed to put them on the D, because they have been out of things for so long, they wouldn't be able to operate a modern Starfleet vessel. And that's what you had with Scotty. He was out of place. He was 80 years out of date with the technology, but in the end, his experience led him to help them solve the problem and rescue the Enterprise D. Yeah. And that's kind of how they really should have played it here. Like, these guys, they're retired, they're old, they don't know how to operate the newfangled gizmos, but their experience puts them in a unique position to solve a problem that is currently stymieing the Federation. Even though that works on Earth scale stories, doesn't work when you've got a galaxy full of brilliant races and a whole bunch of diversity of opinion and thought. You don't really need to dust the old people off, because their life experience is what's going to save the day. But I can see them doing that better for the story. Otherwise, I didn't see a reason to reunite everybody. No. Picard went to Riker to get on board the Titan. leveraging 7 of 9 on there so that they could, even though admirals can waltz onto ships at any time and say we're doing something, and
how many times did that happen in The Next Generation? Pegasus, for example, we're going here, we're going to do that. Okay, off we go. Yeah,
exactly. And Shaw's going to be the one to be like, no, we're not.
Yeah.
Like, it's again, everything was really contrived to force this. Should we talk about Data?
Yeah, I mean, just off the back of what you were just saying about everything being contrived, the red flags were for me right from the outset of the first episode, except I wasn't consciously aware of them at the time. You knew exactly what this was going to be. The very first opening of the very first episode, it was a visual trip through a room of collectibles, nostalgia. It was Beverly's quarters, and she happened to have at that point Picard's log playing from the Borg. We're ready to engage the Borg, and it's like, well, you should have known it was the bloody Borg back then, because they told you, it's the Borg, and just reminded you of Locutus and Jack Crusher, the senior Jack Crusher, and all these things, and it was literally just everything that you saw on screen that Beverly was meant something to Beverly was there, and it was all of that, and you knew exactly then what it was going to be. It was going to be nostalgia.
Yeah.
But yes, on to Data. I just wanted to make that point.
Data. One thing I hated about season 1, despite like the very first episode, the visuals, like the explosion and Picard not getting hurt by the explosion.
Ow! Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All that aside, the premise that, we retrieved one of Data's positronic neurons and now we can recreate like his memory, and I'm like, what? That doesn't work today with the scientific knowledge we have. It won't work 400 years from now.
That's essentially like taking one line of code from a piece of software and saying we can recreate the entire software from that one line of code.
Exactly.
How?
It like everything about that whole storyline just bothered me. The fact that they keep referring to the synthetic body as a golem. I think, and I think more than Shaw did that, because I think Shaw may have been the first. But I thought that the lore was behind a golem was that it was a creature sculpted out of clay that you wrote a command on in a piece of paper, inserted it in its mouth, and it would come to life and perform that command.
Right.
Which isn't and maybe there's a few different variations on the legend, so maybe there's one that fits. It just didn't seem to fit. I don't know if there's a better term for what they did to Picard, but with Data, he died in Nemesis. If you wanted to argue that they found some fragment of him and were keeping it alive, but because it was incomplete, he wanted to die in season 1. That, okay, fine. He got a proper send-off, even though you'd have to think that his best friend was Geordi. He'd probably want to have a send-off from Geordi, or see Geordi, rather than Picard. But Picard was, I guess, a bit of a paternal figure as well. The relationship between Picard and Data didn't seem as strong as between Geordi and Data.
Absolutely. But they played that off in Nemesis anyway, didn't they? They had Geordi's reaction just being one of just, oh, and Picard's just the one who's distraught over it. It's not, that didn't make sense to me. But then again,
Geordi reacted much stronger in, was it The Most Toys?
Yes.
When Data's death was faked.
Yeah, it was like, no, something's wrong. Data wouldn't do this, and he fought so much for it.
Yeah.
I mean, Data was completely obliterated in Nemesis.
Yeah.
There was nothing left. There was nothing left to salvage. There was nothing left of the Scimitar, let alone this little positronic android in the center, right next to the source of the explosion. So I think I can't even imagine how they managed to. I mean, yeah, okay, he transferred his consciousness into B4, the bad copy, as Girardi calls him. Um, but but so they can take like a memory engram, which is referencing Insurrection, where he goes, I appear to be missing several memory engrams, and Picard, and the Voyage just has them there. He goes, oh, there they are. I always like that moment. I thought that was quite funny. But they can take that, and if it is the case of now I forget the term for it because I'm not smart, but it's like every constituent part has, it's like DNA. Every constituent part has the blocks necessary to duplicate another. You know what I mean? It's all. Yeah. It's like a box within a box within a box within a box. Each box has a copy of the box in the box. That would have made more sense, but fractal neuronic cloning just sounds moronic, hence why I called it moronic in my video. And then trying to clone Data from it. Data's consciousness was obliterated. Everything up until that point. I don't understand.
Yeah, it didn't make sense. But okay, so whatever. Okay, so they bring Data back. They use the body that Soong was going to use for himself, but Soong uploaded his mind, Lol's mind, B4's, Data's, and Lore's, despite all the problems that Lore was.
Yes.
It's like, yeah, let's just throw in some evil for the mix. And
unbelievably idiotic, but yep.
They initially had Data flipping between personalities, but he only seemed to flip between Soong, Data, and Lore. I don't even think Lol made an appearance. No. B4 might have briefly, like maybe one line. It would have been like Brent Spiner did it well.
Yes,
great actor. He did that amazingly. It would have been more interesting to kind of keep him in that state, flipping around. The decision they made to do the personality merge, but it only being a battle between Data, who is blue and good on the screen, and Lore, who is red and evil on the screen.
Yeah.
Like, you had this opportunity to bring in also those other characters, Lol, B4, and Soong.
Yes.
And they were just kind of forgotten. Even the whole big memory stealing thing with Data and Lore in the white I guess economical from an SFX perspective void, where it was literally member berries. Remember Sherlock's pipe? Remember Sherlock's hat?
Remember Tasha, yeah?
Yeah. And oh yeah, I remember her. It like that was so painfully obvious, and it was so painfully obvious to just be a serving up member berries for the audience and to get that hit. But then, okay, well now Data and Lore have merged together into something new, but nothing's said about the other three. I would have liked it if the other three had appeared. And like Lol was pretty, I don't even remember what she looked like. She started off as just an androgynous robot. She chose a female form.
Yeah.
They probably could have found a lookalike to play her, or close enough to look like the original Lol actress to have her there. Have Spiner be B4 and Soong as well. I had this theory. I posted a video on another channel that I was ran for another YouTube channel. It was a theory that all the Soongs are clones from Enterprise forward, because the guy who was working with the augments, the geneticist, Arik Soong,
yeah.
he uh, decided that cybernetics was going to be the way to go.
Yes.
After the augments, but he's already a geneticist. He also said it would take several generations to do the research.
Yeah.
So it would make the most sense for him to clone himself, raise his clone, and continue on down the way, which would explain why Data and Lore and all the Soongs all look like Brent Spiner.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good explanation. Clone. Yeah.
And Noonien, when Data met him in the episode Brothers, I think.
Yes.
He's an old man. He pats Data on the face and says, I love that face.
Mm.
And it would kind of go to the narcissism of like you cloning yourself, you're raising your clone, it's always looking like you.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense for me that Arik Soong, or not Arik Soong, but whichever the latest Soong is, that he would clone a body of an elderly man.
Yes.
To his mind into. And I get why they're doing it, because Brent Spiner has aged 30 years.
They did it for the same reason they made the Picard golem an old man. Because they wanted Patrick Stewart. And de-aging software would have it would have broke the bank, I think.
Yeah, it's not that good yet.
No. I always think back to X-Men when was it Origins Wolverine when they de-aged Patrick Stewart. It did not look good. He looked like something out of Robot Chicken.
So like they do that, and it's to bring the character back, and it's now to bring, I guess, a new character, almost like a Tuvix kind of character, because he's now a mix of everybody. But
keep him away from Janeway.
Yeah. They brought him back, and there was never any point where I felt the jeopardy was real. No. You're not going to bring Data back just to kill him, even though his "I hope we die quickly" line was hilarious.
It was the timing. It was timing.
Yeah,
that one.
It was timing and delivery.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was great. But at no point did I figure anything was going to be in true jeopardy. And one of the big reasons for that, like Deep Space Nine's Dominion War, they put them in a few spots where you're like, there's no way the Federation can get out of this.
No.
And half the time it was like Cisco using the prophets to get them, by the skin of their teeth. But Discovery, if you take it as canonical, has already shown that Earth and the Federation, to whatever extent, survives to 500 years or 1,000 years in the future.
Yeah.
This Borg threat, the Borg aren't going to assimilate Earth and get away with it, because we know Earth is there already. Yeah. Unless you're going to argue that Discovery is on its own timeline, which maybe it should be. But the old STD burn is kind of a
see the doctor.
Yeah. But yeah, and that's kind of why, I guess, like you said earlier, the finale kind of fell flat, because there was never, you knew nothing bad was really going to happen. They weren't going to blow up the Enterprise D again. It was going to survive. They weren't all going to sacrifice themselves and blow up the cube and kill Jack to stop the assimilation of Earth. So it just, you were just waiting for it to end at that point, because we'll get to the part where they defeat him and everything's better, and then immediately everything's better, despite the fact that being assimilated is a very traumatic experience. Once you're released from the collective, everybody, their gray skin just goes back to their regular skin color, and they're good.
Yeah, I made that.
LaForge needed a hug. Nobody else needed a hug.
I've just been a Borg. I could do with a hug. Ugh.
Yeah. Everybody else just kind of stands around. Oh, nobody's hugging me. As Seven gives LaForge a big hug.
Oh, the thing is, I made that point in my review. One of those things that I did actually remember to put in my review was how easily and quickly such large stakes were washed away. Were just nothing in the end. Oh, we have a major problem. What's your major problem? Well, we've got shapeshifters, you see, and they are very good at hiding because they are to scanners just like us.
Yeah.
Just like us. Well, how are we going to solve that? We'll do something with the transporter. We'll sort it out. Oh, you got this problem. This is Borg virus that takes over everyone. Oh, okay. What are you going to do? Transporters again. What? Why not? Why not just use the transporters to fix everything? And the rate that everyone was unassimilated was just incredible. It was a signal that was activating something in the mind. Now, when the signal was destroyed, and it's all switched off, the technology just disappears. How does that work?
If it was over, like, they shouldn't have even gone gray, like they were flooded with nano, because that's what happens in a traditional Borg assimilation.
Yes.
You get the nanoprobes injected in you, they start replicating and taking over your body, your blood vessels start turning a dark color because your blood's being replaced by whatever Borg uses blood.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you turn gray and you see the veiny gray pattern in their faces. But they just had that connection in their mind. There was no need for their skin to go gray. It was just done because, hey, that's what happens when you get assimilated. That's the visual, and there's no thought as to what that visual actually represented. So it didn't make any sense to do that. The other thing is, when they initially lost connection, the collective in the fleet were like, connection with control has been lost, resume previous instruction, which was to blow up all the major cities on Earth, thankfully not mine. It was like, well, targeting New York, targeting this place, targeting that place.
Yeah.
And like, they didn't say targeting Winnipeg. And then they're showing on the map all their targets. I was looking for Winnipeg. We're in the center of Canada, longitudinally. And the closest target, I tried to pick it out on a map. There's no city there. It was like somewhere in Nebraska. It just looked like emptiness. There was no major city, unless they were like aiming for Minneapolis, but they seemed way too far south for it. So I sometimes pause and I look at things like that to see what's up on the screen. It was like the fleet too. When they showed the fleet formation, they had all the names of all the ships in the fleet formation. They were all names of humans or Earth terms. There was no like, there were no ships named after aliens, and we know that the Starfleet has plenty of ships that are named after Vulcans or Bolians or whatever. But anyhow, going back to this dissimulation thing, of course the writers have clearly watched Independence Day and the Avengers movie, because when you blow up the big ship, all the soldiers immediately stop.
Yeah.
And
sorry, but everything's fine now. Everything's just dandy.
We already know, if we're ever invaded by aliens, don't even bother with their fighter ships. Just go for the big one, and the rest will just stop.
Yeah. You got to go
the
for
rule.
The mothership. It's got to be the mothership. Someone's just come into the chat. Zell. Hello, guys. Someone's just put, hello, Zell. We're complaining cynically about Star Trek's writing. And that's pretty accurate. But yeah, the dissimulation or unassimilation or whatever you want to call it is... I think was a sadly necessary tool because of the way how fast they wanted to wrap things up. They could have done the final episode as an epilogue with some exposition and explained away what's going on, and perhaps had a little bit more to the future of what they want to do. But they didn't do that. They spent so long on Space Karen that what's left to tell? Well, actually, and Data being at Section 31 along with Kirk's body, Picard's body. So they've already got the bodies of two famous Starfleet captains, and I know why they got Kirk there for the, but I would have thought. I mean, I know that's a reference to the Return, the book series, and the Will Shatner Kirk stories, but he was brought off Iridium 3 for probably the same reason the Enterprise D was lifted off of there. You know, you don't see it at the end of Generations because they just go, "Oh, the Enterprise can't be salvaged." They didn't think about the Prime Directive. This is an alien civilization. You've just left a ship, on there, and whatnot. But they did all that and lifted everything off and put the Enterprise in the fleet in the Fleet Museum to be rebuilt, and put Kirk's body away in cold storage or his skeleton remains or whatever. You've got an attack triple. You've got a Genesis device.
Yes.
Which I think it's the Hall of member berries, and then it's controlled by. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's controlled by Moriarty, or it's controlled by Data, but Moriarty is a security protocol in the space station. He tries to shoot them with a gun, an old-fashioned gun, instead of a phaser on wide beam setting, and it's the Pinocchio song that Riker and Data are singing in the holodeck that shuts Moriarty down.
Yes.
Which I found that again was a prime example of how much something cannot make sense.
Yeah, this was Data recognized them and put a security protocol in place to verify that they weren't changelings, I guess is the argument.
Right.
Because only Riker would know the Pop Goes the Weasel reference, though if anybody had ever heard the song, you would know the end to Pop Goes the Weasel and could whistle it in response if you thought it was a security test. It's not like Pop Goes the Weasel is some esoteric,
yeah, exactly.
children's song.
Yeah.
I thought bringing Morty, if as a place to store top secret stuff, Moriarty would have been a good. that would have made sense to have Moriarty there. Turns out it wasn't Moriarty; it was just a Data security protocol, just like the Raven. Even though I don't know if Data talked to Riker about his Raven dreams. That was that was the two. That was the crossover with Deep Space Nine, right?
Bashir. Was it
Bashir.
Bashir that he spoke to him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bashir was there when they shocked Data and he had his first dream.
Yes. Yeah, because it was a relic they found, a generator of some sort that knocked him backwards.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen that one.
Yeah. No, Data. Data knew about the theft of Picard's body. However, did he know about the changeling threat?
Don't know. Good question.
Because he'd have to have, in order to, get Moriarty to sing that song or whatever, or to get Riker to finish that song. If that was a case of he wanted to make sure it was Riker and not a shapeshifter, he'd have to have known about the shapeshifters. But hey, we can say whatever because they clearly did when they wrote it.
Yeah.
But
yes.
But the whole data coming in again, it was clever to a degree how they brought him in and explained why he's aged, why he looks older and whatnot, and it that's all fair and well, but it still didn't feel like Data. And I know they explained it away because it was a new type of Data, but it felt he felt like a little bit of a sore thumb for me. In amongst the cast of the Next Generation, there was not enough Data in there for him to be familiar.
Yeah, it was Brent Spiner with contacts and
yeah.
And that's fine, because Brent Spiner is a fine actor. You like watching him, but I mean, we've killed this character twice now. And at some point, people got to die and stay dead. This isn't. What show is really bad for doing that? I don't know.
Supernatural.
There's other shows. Okay, I haven't watched any of Supernatural, but okay,
well, spoiler alert.
Yeah, everybody who dies comes back.
Yeah, it happens. Yeah. Red Lady, Red Door, Red Angel. It's like New Trek writers don't know any other colours. Sorry, someone's just commented. And that just goes back to what you said about the colour red. They all love red. And there was just to segue slightly, there's a guy on YouTube called Major Grin. If you've not seen Major Grin, just type in Major Grin on YouTube. And what he does is he just cuts Star Trek together to perform funny videos. And he he had what's behind the big red door, and it's got all the build up and everything. And they open it up, and it's Michael Burnham as the Red Angel. I was crying. I just thought that was so well put together. Because I was half expecting something like that. You know, the Burnham is back. God, but no, Data being in it was interesting, but I didn't think it had the weight that it needed. And also, when you were talking about the different personalities, and Data saying to Lore in the headspace or whatever, you know, these are my memories. You know, these are, you know, and he starts, you know, handing things over. You want to add more gravitas to that, and I'm kind of sticking to a bit of a theme here. Bring Lal into it. Have Lore destroy Lal in some way. That would that would add weight. That would add gravitas to the whole thing that Data's going through.
Yeah.
But they didn't, and it was all soft approach. But part of Lore's appeal as a character, he was dangerously unpredictable, violent, and he was well, yeah, he was unpredictable. He was self-serving.
Yes.
And he could annihilate Worf with a couple of punches and some really dramatic drum music, but he was able to instill fear in those around him because he was unpredictable. But here, just everything seemed a little bit too soft. And as far as I'm concerned, there were so many missed opportunities for some really inventive. I don't want to say retcons, because I don't think they'd have been massive retcons, but some adjustments were needed. You know, you have you have all these legacy characters, and the most you can come up with is a derivative mix of Deep Space Nine, Star Trek First Contact, Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, Star Wars, and all of these other shows and movies and ideas and concepts, and you just mash them together in a really messy way, but overlay it with so much nostalgia that people who will naturally do what people do nowadays with streaming services is they'll go binge. It's so easy to get past people's rational thinking or rational mind and just completely throw them off their game.
Yeah.
So, and the series was full of that. You know, you had so much mystery at the beginning. I have to say, I honestly don't really care. I didn't care when I was watching it. I thought, well, where are they going to take this? Because, you know, okay, there's shapeshifters. Oh, okay, they've changed the shapeshifters. Are they the bad guy? Oh, no, they're not the bad guy. There's another bad guy, but even bigger bad. Well, I was expecting something akin to season one, where they were going for galaxy ending stuff. You know, real threat, not it's the Borg again. You know, it's
Yeah.
it's.
Yeah. At this point, the Federation is just like, let's close the curtains and hope they go away, because the Borg aren't any real threat, and they really haven't been for some time.
No,
Um,
they haven't. Just one question for everyone in the chat: is there one person having issues with a low volume, or is everybody having issues? Is the volume okay? Let us know, so we can sort that out. But nothing's changed on the stream, so I assume it's all okay.
Most YouTubers yell, so we're just not yelling enough.
Everyone's pretty much saying it's fine. It might be Kevries, it might be your crappy earbuds, mate. Yeah, as you say. I think going back to what I was saying about the other YouTubers and what they've said about this series, it's surprising. Because a lot of them will pick out awful, terrible writing. They'll pick it out straight away. That's their job.
Yeah.
So, what's different here? Yes, okay, it's better because it had more Star Trek visual elements. Gumph. It had more Star Trek gumph in it, but it was not a Star Trek story. At best, it was a slightly more intelligent Star Wars story, and that's not ripping on Star Wars. I'm not talking classic Star Wars. I'm talking modern Star Wars. You know, if you take shows like The Mandalorian, simple concept. It's so badly executed lately. They can't do anything decent with it. So. Here's Picard, here's a new showrunner who's been given a season, and he just goes, you know what the fans want? What our fans actually want is they want to see the Enterprise D. They want to see the Enterprise D, they want to see the Borg again, because everyone loves the Borg as a villain. They want to see references to Deep Space Nine, past ones, you know. People have moved on, you know, passed away and everything like that. They want nostalgia. Let's do a tour of the ship and let's give them everything that we think they want. Because certain YouTubers have said, "Oh, where's this? Oh, where's that?" You know, but where's the quality? Where's the writing? Where is the writing team? You want to bring back a cast reunion? Sod the cast reunion. Bring back the writers' reunion.
Exactly.
Bring back all these wonderful writers who gave us the stories and say, right, here's what I want to do. I'm Terry Metalis. I'm the showrunner. Here's what I want to do. Jerry Taylor, come back in. Ronald D. Moore, come back in. Ira Stephen Bear, come back in and write me a season that you think the fans are going to adore. No.
Yeah.
I'll do it all. And because I think I know what they want. Nostalgia.
And I think we're less nostalgic for visuals and character cameos than we are nostalgic for the feeling that Star Trek would give us, or the thoughtfulness that Star Trek would give us. That's what we're nostalgic for. Give me Darmok. Give me an episode like Darmok.
Yes,
give me an
please.
episode like I don't know. I could pick so many from all the previous series, where you come away from it and you just you feel something. You're either questioning something or you feel something. And it's not just feeling like the nostalgia feeling that wears away really quickly. It's like, oh wow, there's Voyager, there's the theme music. It's at the Fleet Museum. We hear the theme music, makes you feel good, and then it's gone, and it doesn't really persist beyond the episode. Something I wanted to bring up because I'd made a note about it, and it hasn't really been talked about. Shaw's arc with respect to 7 of 9, I did not think it went well. Shaw was at Wolf 359, so he hates the Borg. I bet a lot of people do. Trauma associated, just like Sisko. He harbors resentment towards the Borg. 7 of 9 is not the ideal first officer for him, but he's stuck with her, and he's clearly prejudiced against her. He refuses to call her by her name, and you'd think that by the 24th century, Since now we're already transitioning to you are free to be called whatever you want to be called. You're free to identify with whatever name or pronouns you want to identify with. That by the 24th century, that's just going to be, you aren't even going to think about it. It's just part of life.
Yes.
Now, what should have happened with Shaw and Seven is they should have been put in a dire situation together, trapped in a turbo lift, ship on fire, whatever, where there is an opportunity where they can't do anything. They're stuck together. He has an opportunity to air his grievances and his point of view. She'd explain her experiences as a Borg, her point of view, her reclamation of her humanity, etc. He'd have to consider it, and then realize that his prejudice, his anger, and his hatred has caused him to judge her harshly, and then start calling her 7 of 9 out of respect. That's what you normally expect in those sort of stories. Like O'Brien was prejudiced against Cardassians because he fought against them in some military conflicts the Federation had with Cardassians. And there were episodes where he was forced to work with them, and he was forced to bring those prejudices and those grievances to the surface and deal with them and realize that he was the problem.
Yes.
And Shaw kind of has that story arc, but it's kind of really lazily done. So, he goes through the whole thing being angry and at 7. Then he gets shot in front of her when her and Rafi stay behind because only the TNG cast are allowed to go to the D.
Yeah. No new people allowed.
And he decides to call her 7 of 9 with his dying breath. So you could say that was the moment that he had a change of heart on his deathbed or whatever. But then Tuvok plays his evaluation, and he does nothing but sing her praises and then refer to her as 7 of 9, which kind of undoes the whole kind of little arc or the little bit of growth we saw for him. Like, it's just another example of poor character writing. And I get it that Shaw was a stand-in for the people on YouTube who complain about the first 2 seasons, and he would specifically identify things that people complain about and call them garbage.
Yeah.
Which is funny, but it doesn't really feel like addressing anything. It's meta. I guess it's clever and it's meta, but it's not really meaty or good character building. But
No, it was completely out of place. I mean, this is why I said in my video, I don't think I was clear enough that it's not indicative of the Shaw that we remember.
Mm-hmm.
And you can retroactively play a clip all you want. It doesn't change the way he treated her. If he actually said to 7, to 7 of 9, or he'd actually said about 7 of 9 the things that he said, then that makes everything he did from before episode 1 to that point, it makes him nothing more than a dick.
Yeah.
A vindictive individual who's torturing her. Because, and, I asked the question, I can't remember where I asked the question, might have been on the last stream, might have been in a video, but why on earth is 7 of 9 his first officer? Starfleet must be aware that he was at Wolf 359 and that he suffered a loss, as everybody did. 7 of 9 would be very difficult to give her a posting.
Mm-hmm.
Very difficult. And in the final episode of last season, I'm going to struggle to get there, to be fair. Hang on a minute, let me get the words out. Jean-Luc Picard gives her a field commission of captain, just because she's worth it, I suppose.
Yeah.
And everybody must listen to 7 of 9. And she's a captain. So she's capable of commanding. We know that. Or do we? Because she was a fucking Fenris Ranger. And, no inkling of being a captain whatsoever, other than a captain of her own ship with no one to command.
Yeah.
So it should be very difficult to place in Starfleet. Quite honestly, I wouldn't have her anywhere out in the galaxy at all. No way. I'd have her working at Starfleet Science or Development Technology. You would think Section 31 would probably want her. Or Starfleet Intelligence. Her knowledge on the Borg is so bloody vast.
And even on the Voyager, she was constantly upgrading their systems. The astrometrics lab, like she was very much a STEM woman.
Yes.
She was science, tech, engineering, math. She was not command. She had issues with Starfleet's chain of command. She found it inefficient in many ways and stuff, because you come from the Borg, where decisions are collectively made immediately. There isn't a lot of time for arguing or stuff. So and that's what made her a unique character too, because she was a human who experienced the hive mind. And even though the hive mind is this horrible nightmare for us, she would look at it as a source of positivity and be like, you humans are just running around arguing with each other all the time. It's amazing you get anything done.
Yeah.
And it's a good critique, and that she was a fascinating character for that aspect, her ability to look at humanity through this lens of like this disconnectedness, and criticize it. So yeah, I don't see her in a command structure. Of course, I don't see her as a Fenris Ranger either.
No, the again, I suppose it's what's cool nowadays is to have characters like Seven of Nine, who was analytical, logical, but with respect. They played her and Tuvok off because they were essentially the same character from a different perspective. And they got along so well in the opera. She was very methodical and drone-like in her reclamation of humanity. She still remained mostly Seven of Nine. She'd occasionally smile and everything, but she didn't turn into a wisecracking drunk.
Yeah. Now, granted, after 20 years, maybe she's finally that rebellious teenager that she never got to be
possibly
as a drone. But there wasn't a lot of exposition given to explain why she was the way she was.
No.
Even in season 1, did they say in season 1 that she was kicked out of Starfleet? I thought that, or rejected from Starfleet. I thought they brought that up in season 2.
I think it was season 2 when she was saying to Rafi, but in the middle of the crisis situation where they got to run across the field with the Borg with the green lasers, she turns and says, Rafi says, "You'd have made one hell of a captain," and she says, "Oh, well, I did try. Janeway recommended me, but Starfleet said no, they don't want to Borg. They don't want to Borg, even though they've let other people rejoin Starfleet, apparently with very poor medical scans taken." Even though they've let other people, they rejected Seven of Nine because she was former Borg. That is bull. Absolute bull. And
they let Ro Laren back in and gave her an admiralty or whatever.
No, we didn't get to Ro Laren.
Terrorist.
Oh my god, yeah, yeah, but that, again, a new Trek trope. Doesn't matter how many times you're mutinous, you betray the Federation, you're always allowed back in because inclusivity and all of that stuff. Ro Laren betrayed Starfleet, betrayed Jean-Luc Picard, betrayed her uniform, and was let in. Do you honestly think for a split second they'd have met Michael Eddington back into Starfleet? They would not have. He would not make her anywhere near a Starfleet uniform again. Ro Laren would never get near a Starfleet uniform again. She betrayed her uniform. And quite honestly, I honestly thought she had died. In what the Jem'Hadar did to the Marquis, I thought she'd have been obliterated, or at least have ended up in prison, and that would have been a much more interesting story, I think, than having her be the one who has uncovered this changing plot because Starfleet let her back in. They let Ro Laren in, but they didn't let Seven of Nine in, a fully capable, more capable than Ro Laren, and a bigger resource than Ro Laren.
Yeah. Yeah,
but Starfleet's so damn xenophobic anyway, they wouldn't let anyone back in.
See, there is another reason they could have fixed this if they retconned season 1 as being the changeling influence. Because if they're already buddies with the Borg, they may already not like Seven of Nine because maybe they can't replicate her. They can't replace her.
Yeah. That's a
because
good
she's
point.
too much mechanical pieces, not just organic. Though they don't explain where the changelings' clothes come from, if they're wearing uniforms or if the uniforms are part of their body. Um, they don't explain it. They never explain stuff like that.
No, it's far too much
But
work.
um, see, that could have explained that why Seven of Nine would be rejected when that seems to just be the antithesis of what Starfleet's mission is, to
Yeah,
explore strange new worlds and new civilizations and stuff. If it was the changeling threat or the changeling infiltration, that would have explained that away, and it would have been like, okay, now that makes sense why Seven was rejected, and maybe why she's bitter about it and not wanting to do anything with Starfleet because of that. Even with Janeway's support, the people in charge didn't want it. But it's like they didn't think of it, or they didn't have time to fit it in, or they're just, I don't know. They dropped the ball to make it better writing, and it all comes back to better writing.
yes, and that's again going back to what we were saying. That's what we're here for. It's well written stories. The young version of me, Clayton, would have loved this season of Picard. The unthinking version of me, the teenager in me, the 7-year-old, 8-year-old, would have loved this season of Picard because it would have been perfectly aimed at me without, take away some of the violence and stuff. It would have been aimed at me back then. Simple minded, not thinking, not over-analysing, not looking into anything from a mature perspective. It's literally just Enterprise D, look at it go, wow, that's brilliant, look at Worf, look at the shuttles, look at Ro Laren's back, oh wow, it's great to see that little member berry with Tasha Yar and Data's back, wow, he's brilliant, and here's Shelby as well, oh dear, she's been shot. It would be... It would have enthralled the child inside me. And in some ways, it did give it a little tickle. Yeah. But I can't afford, as an adult, as a mature-minded, thinking individual, I cannot afford to just sit there and switch off when I'm expecting to see something intelligent. Has to be... What you're expecting, it has to be what you're expecting, not a subversion of your expectations in terms of good writing. So basic, so simple, and that's what season 3 was. It was simple Trek.
Yeah,
it wasn't bad, and I'll get shot at dawn for saying this. It wasn't bad. Its heart was in the right place. But it missed the mark, in my opinion. I'm going to ask you for yours. An overall opinion of this season, anyway. But in my opinion, it missed the mark. It catered to the wrong type of fan. In my mind, it didn't cater to the core Star Trek fans. Now you can say people. There can be different types of Star Trek fan. There are people who love the ships. There are people who love the characters. There are people that love the races. There are people that love the stories. There are people that just love everything and will accept whatever they're being fed in terms of Star Trek. But the core difference with Star Trek to most other sci-fis, not all, but most, and this is something the Orville's captured, and you notice how the Orville is not as popular as New Trek. Because the Orville is appealing to that core audience, the next generation fans, the Deep Space Nine fans, all the pre-2005 Star Trek. That's where it's going. It's going for that style of storytelling, that style of lighting, that style of visual direction. That style of storytelling is what is aimed at the core fans. So that it's not as popular as all the stuff they're throwing out because it doesn't have so much pizzazz. It has core storytelling, and that's my theory. That's my opinion as to what new Star Trek is in different to what old Star Trek is and what the Orville is. New Trek's there to feed you. It's junk food, as we said before. It's junk food, and this was just more attractive junk food. But I feel like it was still junk food. I'm very grateful for what Terry Matalas has done in terms of giving me those visual hits, giving me that little hint of nostalgia, but it was all leading me to the wrong place of my own, in my own mind, of what I wanted from it. It was pulling me back in and claiming that nostalgia was the most important thing. It wasn't. It never was. You tell a good story, I'm hooked. I'm listening. I'm watching. You tell me a good story in any setting. You tell me a good story in a chick flick and I'll watch it because it's a good story. But tell me a bad story and it doesn't matter what face it has on it, I'm not going to give it the time of day. Unless I'm doing a channel where I review it. So that's my thoughts. Please, you have the floor. Summarise.
Yeah, you covered a lot of it. I too am appreciative of this season. I think perhaps the powers that be were listening to the criticisms, and a lot of it, like, yeah, there are people I'm sure who hate watch things, but I think a lot of the criticisms against season 1 and season 2 were very valid, and I think that this season implies that they're listening. They are trying to do course corrections on some rather sore spots and some sticking points with seasons 1 and 2. And while at the same time throwing so much gorgeous nostalgia at us with beautiful CGI. Jupiter shots are beautiful. Borg cube looked amazing, even though it was way bigger than any. It looked way bigger than other cubes.
It was the biggest cube. Yeah.
I guess it's the Queen's cube that has to be the yeah.
The Enterprise was this big. The cube was this big. Yeah.
And there were other shots that were really nice.
Yes.
The battlefield from Deep Space Nine, where they were hiding for a while.
Chintaka.
Chintaka.
Yeah.
That looked pretty cool.
Yeah.
The nebula was neat. The nebula felt like an original story that they didn't actually pay attention to. Because if you were to picture the nebula episode, or the couple episodes that take place in the nebula, as a TNG episode, they would have been caught in the gravity. It would have been different because they weren't expecting this inside a nebula. There would have been investigations, attempts to escape. They would be discovering at some point that this is actually a life form and it's going through a reproductive cycle, and what they are doing is damaging it. And so they have to change tact because they don't want to harm other life forms. And then you would have the beautiful burst forward with the space jellyfish, and it would have been, lovely. But they didn't do it quite right. Like it's once again shades of everything, but just at the just on the surface level. So you get that kind of episode, but it's almost an afterthought of what's going on in the background. Oh, we'll just use the gravity waves to ride the ship out. And then, now there's jellyfish. Now there's space jellyfish. And it's beautiful. It's like seat right out of Avatar. It's once again, it's the poor writing. They've got all the pieces. They're just not assembling it in a way that you would expect from Star Trek. And you're right about the Orville. It gives you those, and the Orville has its flaws. There's things about Orville I don't like, but the storytelling is heads and shoulders above anything we've seen from Discovery or the first 2 seasons of Picard. And I think that this season existed to, and I predicted early on, the second we had Jack Crusher and then they showed like LaForge's kid, I'm like, they're setting up for the next generation. And that's ultimately what this did. So it corrected some of the issues with season 1 and season 2. You can explain away a lot of the problems if you just throw the changeling infiltration as the solution, and it kind of gives them a bit of a reset to start a new series. I'm hopeful for that new series. If that does, like, I like Seven of Nine character. Still don't think she should be in command. I hate Rafi. The fact that they put like here's an Orville rip. They put the X of the captain as the
yeah, I hadn't considered that.
And then the rest of the crew are the kids from the D. I'm surprised they didn't bring Naomi Wildman on because she was Voyager's kid.
Yeah, maybe she got her eyeball ripped out.
And my takeaway is, from a eugenics perspective, they really should have had Beverly Crusher creating more babies, because every kid she makes is like a magic baby.
Yeah,
like Wesley Crusher's magic, Jack Crusher's magic. Like,
I see a patent being applied for.
It was enjoyable to watch. I don't know if I'd go back and watch it again.
I think that's the metric, isn't it?
And that's kind of sad, because I love all those characters. I love the Enterprise D. Yeah. But I mean, at this point, I would just skip everything with Vadic.
Yeah.
And maybe just watch where they bring out the Enterprise D, and even then, that all gets wrapped up in the first half hour of episode 10. Yeah, it fell flat for me. I liked seeing the old crew. I like seeing the Enterprise D. I like the special effects. I'm tired of the Borg Queen. The changelings felt like they were just merely a diversion to obfuscate the Borg involvement, and ultimately didn't really matter, because they had them solved by the end of the series anyway. This is better. This is getting closer. It feels like they're trying to get closer to what Star Trek used to be, and for that I applaud them, for rather than just doubling down and going all in with another Discovery style series. I'm not hopeful that they won't do that with whatever they spin off with this next generation, if they do spin off, because they spend a lot of time developing these characters, Jack and LaForge, and it would be a shame if we don't get to see them going forward. But better than 1 and 2. Still nowhere near anything pre-2009 in terms of enjoyability, rewatchability. Which is sad, because I like the people. I like this. I like the Star Trek universe. I like all this, but you're not giving me anything I've gone back to rewatch yet since Discovery started.
No, I completely agree with you. We're definitely on the same page with that. We had a super chat come in. It's for £9.99 British sterling, of course. So Zell, very much appreciative of that super chat. So thank you very much. Appreciate what Metalis has done. The series is okay if you switch off your brain, but overall. The overall story I didn't feel was very strong. The first part of the Nebula was the best part for me, 6 out of 10. And fair play to you, mate. To be fair, thank you so much for that super chat. That's really made our day. However, people are. It's strange. As I said earlier, the fan base has there's now there's several divides in the fan base. You got people who love New Trek and who like the old Trek. You people who just like old Trek and don't like New Trek. You got people who like certain aspects of New Trek and loves previous Star Trek, and you've got the people who have come in board that don't understand old Star Trek and simply like what they're putting out now. I'll be honest with you. There are 2 shows that are going to feed my channel this year and next year, and that is Strange New Worlds and Star Trek Discovery. They're going to feed my channel. It's going to be. We know Discovery is going to be bad. we know it's going to be Next Levels are bad, and we know Strange New Worlds is going to be, judging by the trailer, quite awful. I don't think it's going to be as well received as the first season. But again, I've been wrong before. But I think, generally speaking, you're right. I couldn't go back and rewatch Picard. I may have to, but I simply just don't think there's enough there. And you're right. You just want to see the highlights, wouldn't you? Really?
Yeah. Like I tell you, if I'm going to be cooking dinner and it's going to take me a while, I'll bring up Netflix on my phone and put on some old episode of TNG and let it play and enjoy it.
Exactly.
And I don't see myself doing that, or Voyager, or Enterprise, or Deep Space Nine, and I don't see myself doing that. I've never done it with Discovery.
No.
Despite how long it's been on the air, I've never gone back and rewatched. And so far with Picard, I've never gone back and rewatched.
Wow.
And I think for me, that's my way of, like, I've rewatched Orville episodes. There's been a few I've rewatched. Like I've gone back with my wife likes the Orville. We've gone back and we've rewatched it a few times, like season 1 especially. We like, but yeah, I haven't gone back to Discovery, haven't gone back to Picard, and I want to like Star Trek. I want that. I want to be given something that is so great. It's like I got to watch this again.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
And we're not getting that, or I'm not getting that, and maybe it's because I don't like shows where I have to turn off my brain, or I have to be in the right mood for it, or I don't associate Star Trek with, like, I need to stop. I can stop thinking now and just see explosions and space battles. I don't have that association with Star Trek, so I don't like it when it's not like that, or when it is like that.
Absolutely. And you made reference at the beginning of the stream, and I've had this comment come up quite a lot on my channel, is that we see Star Trek with rose-tinted glasses. I don't think that's the case either. And the reason I say that, Clayton, is I'm aware that not all episodes are great. They have to try different things every week. They had to write a new episode, a fresh episode every week, and sometimes it just wouldn't stick. It just didn't land. Shades of Grey was terrible simply because there was a writer's strike on, and they had to do a montage episode, and they did it all the times with sitcoms. I think Friends did it a few times, where they had no material to write because there was no one to write. And we all remember Code of Honor. Was it Code of Honor? Terrible episode of The Next Generation, and it was massively controversial as well. But to me, Threshold, as you mentioned, Threshold was just next level terrible. But there was some there are terrible episodes. Move Along Home, Deep Space Nine, awful, and just sorry, but the cast were not on fire that day. They had an off day, and so Star Trek has got its problems. And if you think about it, mate, if you really think about it, you can pick apart Star Trek pretty easily. If you really think about it, but New Trek you can rip apart without a single thought. It's that easy to do. You can rip any television show apart and find plot holes and find contrivances, conveniences. It happens everywhere. Voyager was full of them. Yeah, and we don't think that Star Trek pre-2009 is something that we put on this plinth, and it's perfect and it's untouchable. We don't think that. 99% of Star Trek fans don't think Star Trek is perfect. We think it was very good for what we wanted it for, and that's the point. It was great storytelling, and this simply isn't. I'm going to give the chat 10 minutes to ask any questions they want to ask of yourself and of me. It is. I'm opening the floor to the chat for 10 minutes because we have actually gone past the 3-hour mark for this stream. We said we wouldn't, but we have.
Yeah, I know. It's and I was, keeping my eye on the clock every once in a while and be like, wow, this is going to go 3 hours again. And
Yeah.
we're just talking about one season of one show. Like, I can understand talking about 7 different shows
Yeah.
going that long.
Yeah.
But
How did we how did we do, guys? You let us know. Real troopers. And we said that we wouldn't make it a long stream, but I think there was enough to say about season 3. So if you're interested, in a few weeks' time, we'll do a 5-hour stream on season 2.
oh,
because
God.
because there would be a lot to digest on that one, I think.
Yeah, you wouldn't have any volume problems. There'd be lots of yelling in that one.
Oh my
That was an
God.
infuriating season.
Oh my God, it was oh, I couldn't, I still can't make it. I can't make sense of my reviews telling people about it. That's how bad it is, because I couldn't explain what was going on.
When I was in grade 7, we had an English teacher. He gave us this one assignment once in school. We were sitting in rows of desks, and you took out a piece of paper and you wrote the first few sentences to a story, and then you folded it down so just the last sentence of the last paragraph was left, and then you handed it to the person behind you, who would then try to continue the story based off the previous sentence, and then it would repeat, and you'd end up with this crazy nonsense.
Yeah.
And that feels a lot like what season 2 was. It was just like somebody gave the last few sentences of the previous episode to the next guy, and he wrote some stuff, and it didn't make any sense.
One of the things that made me laugh that happened in season 2 was the cop. The cop that gets onto the ship that the Queen brings onto the ship, and Jurati, and he's carried off, and there's just no implications to any of them. There's no consequences for anything. They're all constantly on about, we've got to remove the butterflies, we've got to remove anything that can affect the future. But they're just doing stuff all over the place, making a royal mess, to the point where, I'm sorry, but you're not dropping butterflies at the minute. You're actually dropping wrecking balls into the timeline. I'll remind chat, the floor is yours for any questions that you have for Clayton or myself. Just put it in and we'll try and answer any questions and anything that you want to say. I have been keeping an eye on the chat, but I didn't want to interrupt the conversation like I just have. So, but yeah, I think it's... I think that would be a much longer stream.
Yeah.
And I'm not actually sure. I wanted to get your opinion. Do you think it's a good idea? And you guys in the chat, do you think it's a good idea to go back to Star Trek Picard season 1, torture myself and actually watch each episode and then do a review in the same way style that I've done for the season 2 review? If I don't think it would do the channel metrics any good, but it might be fun to do. I'm not sure.
We'd get more Picard impressions. And that's really what the viewers want.
Well, this is yeah, you're probably right. They would go. Although I'm putting the compilations up and they're not getting they are getting love, but they're not getting a lot of love. To be fair, it's just one of those crazy wacky things I've decided to do. No, I'd watch it, but I don't want you to torture yourself. Yes, the impressions would be great. Season 2 will require a lot of chemotherapy. No, that's true. That's true. I think, I think that would be. Season 2 was interesting. I'd love to do a stream on season 2, but I know that would require a lot of fortification and a lot of time, which, as you and I both know, is very limited these days.
Yes. Yeah.
But if anybody watching the stream, just look in the description. I've put a link to Clayton's book. It's called Holocene, and it is. I've not long purchased it myself. I'm going to sit down and read it. But I'm sure it's an absolutely fantastic book. Please go over there and have a look. Buy yourself a copy and help support Clayton. And go over to his channel and give him a subscription on his channel, because I'm sure that would absolutely help him out. We want to try and get Clayton his review videos are absolutely fantastic, and very very analytical and very to the point. He's become a very very good friend of mine. So I'm ever so thankful for you to having subscribed to my channel, Clayton. It's been lovely to meet you and to form this bond that we have. It's very good, very very precious to me. So so I really appreciate it.
It's been wonderful. Thank you for doing these videos, because it was your Picard and Discovery videos that made me decide to start doing my own and for Quantum Leap and reach out to you. So
I really appreciate it. I'm so glad you did. I'm so glad you did. I like to think that I'm open to anyone who can contact me. On that note, I do actually have another live stream planned with another one of my subscribers. We're going to just be generally talking about I'm not exactly sure, I can't exactly remember what topic we chose, but I will be doing another live stream, and she'll be joining me much in the same way. I don't know, I think there is a time limit on that one though, so I think that's going to be scheduled for next Sunday. But I'd definitely be down for another live stream with you, Clayton, and I'd be down for making it a more regular thing. If there's stuff to talk about, I'd be absolutely up for that. For sure.
Oh yeah, these are great fun.
Oh, brilliant.
They must be. We do them for like 3 hours before we're like. I got family checking on me to see if I'm still alive.
Yeah, I think when my family want to check on me, they'll just go onto YouTube, check I'm still alive there. But no, I think last time it was a case of we ended the stream and we both said bathroom break, which is part of the motivation why I'm trying to speed this along a little bit. But no,
I drank 1 glass of water this time,
just to be on the safe side. Well, I had a cup of tea and I had a flask of tea. I did not learn my lesson at all. So I really appreciate everybody who's come along for this stream. I do apologise. This stream did not mesh with the scheduled stream that I put out on the channel. It didn't, for some reason, it didn't marry up. I checked it, and I think it's still waiting to go on that original stream. But I think a lot of the people who had seen that would have seen the stream had started. So I do apologise for any technical stuff. We are fairly new to this whole streaming scene. But once again, thank you so much for joining me. Head on over to Clayton's channel. Follow that link in the description to Clayton's book and show your love and support for him there. And thank you so much for the super chat. And thank you so much for joining this very, very long discussion. It's going to be a bye-bye from me. And don't worry, there will be more Picard impressions in the future. It's not going away. It's like the one thing I can do. I've got to milk that somehow. But thank you so much, Clayton, for joining me. And thank you so much to everybody for coming along.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Richard, for having me.
Always a pleasure, my friend. You look after yourself, and I will see you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.